All right. Do 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 do. Hello. Hello everyone out in the world. Here we are at thecanadiancommie.com live streaming Tuesday 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we do every week. This is the first stream of the new year. And boy, has it been a week. There has been things that have happened. Peanut Butter Beatrice, how you doing? Good to see you. I am, of course, very proud of myself today because I promised myself I was going to get out to the gym. And I woke up this morning and I was like, oof, not feeling it. Feeling groggy, feeling tired, feeling run down. But I went anyway. So I'm proud of myself. I did the thing. I did the thing. Austin Wallace, good to see you. Good to see you. I mean, of course, the big news for the week. The big news for the week. Austin Wallace says, I just finished watching the previous two live stream videos as I wasn't able to the days you stream. Well, that's kind of you, Austin. That's very nice. It's so nice to know that there are people who really value what I'm doing and what I'm putting out there and who are fans of the work that I do. That's really nice. I'm so glad that you guys are here. I'm so glad that you value what I'm doing. I know for myself, I take a great deal. It's good for my mental health to do this. I'm glad that I've reduced it down to the once a week. I think that that's also good for my mental health, but I think it's so important that we actually have spaces that we feel we can go to have serious conversations about what's happening and what's going to happen. And I feel like other spaces, like one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently in this regard, is that there's been a lot of like laughing at the situation. There's been a lot of like ha-haing at the situation. I feel like most streamers and most people who are putting out this style of content are doing so with this kind of like wry, like cocked, smirking smile, being like, can you believe it? And we're all supposed to sort of laugh at it. And I guess it has that attitude of like, well, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And I was feeling this way about my music recently. A lot of my music I play, and I'm like, there's a lot of like crying in this music, right? There's a lot of grief in the music. But I feel like we're entering a period of time where I think it's time for us to stop laughing. You know, it's time for us to stop listening to comedians. It's time for us to stop listening to people who are trying to make light of the situation. It's time for us to stop laughing. You know? Like, I know for myself, like, I get caught in that kind of pattern of like, look at the absurdity of all of this. Look at how absurd it is. How can you not laugh at it? And I'm just... But, like, it's deathly serious, right? Like, it's deathly serious what we're doing. And it feels like we're not actually taking it seriously, because I feel like if we started to actually take it seriously, it would either cripple us or spur us into a type of action that we know would lead to dire consequences for our lives. But the dire consequences for our lives are right in front of us now. Like, we literally have the President of the United States of America threatening economic warfare against Canada and literal warfare against Greenland, Panama, Mexico, right? Like, when I talk to people who are involved in politics here in Canada, they're all saying the entire conversation that everybody is having is about these tariffs and about the tariff threat, right? Leon says hello. Good to see you, Leon. XD, always a pleasure. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, you're a great anchor for me as this world spins faster out of control. It's therapeutic for my mental health. Yeah, that's more or less my goal, Peanut Butter Beatrice, is to let people know that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. It is a bit dizzying, isn't it? Like, it's a bit like everything's moving so quickly. everything's moving at such an accelerated pace, and I do feel like it's good to come into a space where we can all sort of slow it down and just kind of process it all together and air concerns together and have a conversation together. And I think my resolution for this channel moving forward is to stop getting hung up. Like, when new people come in and ask questions, I do want to defer to them, but I think I'm kind of done with trying to convince people that the sky is blue, Like, I understand that there's a lot of propaganda out there and there's a lot of false information, but, I just kind of have to get to the point and move on, because I feel like I waste a lot of time on those people who just end up kind of being incredulous anyway, so it's like, why did I bother? A. Leon writes, yeah, like, this is the thing, like, A. Leon writes, I have a coworker who wants Trump to annex Canada. Madness. But this is just it, right? Like, we want to believe that the statements that are made by people like Donald Trump are just sort of weird, strange, chaotic sort of things, and that, that could never happen. Sure it could. Sure it could. It absolutely could. Right? Like, all we need is weak leadership. All we need is just a cowardly group of people, which, is every politician, to basically bend the knee, right? And it isn't as though Trump does not have leverage. Like, I'm more or less of the opinion that Donald Trump coming into office with this big blanket 25% tariff threat on everybody is a negotiating tactic. It's him essentially telling all the leadership across the Western world, all of their trading partners and everybody, you better take me seriously. Like, I can imagine that Donald Trump, like, you think about the experience that Donald Trump has had. Think about all of the things that has been said of Donald Trump. Think about his first experience in his first term, and then his experience after that, and then the lead up to this term. And I feel like if I'm him, I'm sitting there going, what can I do to make these people take me seriously? What can I do to really put it immediately right in front of their faces that I could wreck you if I wanted? 25% tariff will do that. If Canada was hit with a 10% tariff, forget 25% tariff. If Canada was hit with a 10% tariff, it would destroy our economy. Huge, gigantic organizations would fold the day it happened. Canada has positioned itself, and has been positioned by Western forces generally, to be primarily a producer of resources. That we will produce piglets, for example, but then we ship those piglets down south over the border, and they fatten them and then they slaughter them. We will produce the oil, but we don't refine the oil. We will grow the grain, but we won't change it into bread. So we Canada have become a resource producer, but we don't actually take that raw resource and manufacture it into anything else. And so when Donald Trump says, we're going to hit you with a 25% tariff, that's basically going to make a lot of these producers fold immediately. They're not going to be able to withstand that. And of course, my response to this, as the communist that I am, is we should be moving to domestic production. Like, we should be controlling our own productive capacity. Why aren't we already doing that? And then, of course, you look down the line and you find out that it's just because some politician took a kickback and made a deal with somebody. That's really what it was. New CI drone pilot over on Twitch. Provincial governor of Canada resigned. Yeah, very big news. I don't know how big of news it actually is. Like, the overarching story is that Pierre Poilievre is going to win the next election. I don't see how the Liberals or the NDP are going to pull up on that. The momentum is in that direction, and it's going to take like a very significant push, more significant than the Liberals and the NDP have. I don't I like the Liberals are out of bullets. They got nothing, and the NDP I feel have capped out in their support generally because Canadians are not in a position where they're going to be voting for someone like Jagmeet Singh. Right? I've said it over and over again on this channel, and I think it's just generally accepted by people who lean left and are on the left of the Canadian spectrum, outside of like very specific groups of people. Canadians are just not going to vote for a man with a turban. They're just not going to do that. Right? Specifically, white Canadians are not going to vote for a man with a turban. It's just not a reality. And so the NDP support has essentially capped. It's basically stuck where it is. That if Jagmeet Singh was a white guy named Jason Singer, everybody would be like, "Oh, we got to vote for Singer. Oh my God, what if let's get away from Trudeau? Let's go for Singer." Right? I think there would be a legitimate play there, but a ton of these, especially like young white men, right? You know, white men under 30, they're looking over at Jagmeet Singh. They don't listen to what he says. They don't care what he has to offer. They not that the NDP are actually offering anything serious. But, like, they're not even really giving him a chance, right? And then they listen to, Pierre Poilievre and their, Daddy Jordy Peterson. And they're just like, well, Daddy Jordy Peterson likes him, right? And off to the races they go. Friendly Fire, or Friendly FFS, good to see you. So, what is the news here with Justin Trudeau stepping down? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. They were polling at like 10%, 11%, which was actually in decline, right? So I think the Liberals basically understood that if they go into this next election with Justin Trudeau as their leader, they're toast. And they are toast. Like, if the election was held today, the Trudeau Liberals would have 6 seats in Parliament, right? That's a disaster. That's like a fundamental disaster for the party. That's basically the death of that party. And I mean, I'm more or less of the opinion that people who are, standing up and applauding for Nazis, erecting Nazi monuments, yeah, that's a party that can die. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with a Nazi sympathetic party dying off. That's fine by me. But of course, what it's going to do is it's going to raise Pierre Poilievre up as the leader of Canada during a very fracas sort of moment, during a very destabilized moment in Canadian politics. And Pierre Poilievre has done a very good job of positioning himself as the reasonable sounding alternative. And he's done it basically by acknowledging the realities of what Canada is experiencing. Like when Pierre Poilievre talks about the problems that people are facing, he sounds like a communist, right? He sounds like me. Like he's done a very good job of positioning himself as saying, yeah, housing prices are out of control. Like kids can't get jobs. They're graduating from school with all this debt. Like how can you expect people to have families under these conditions? Prices are out of control. Inflation's out of control. Right? Like over and over and over again. He's just like nailing it out of the park over and over and over again. And that gains him a lot of sympathy amongst the kind of uneducated masses. And then he turns around and what are his solutions? Well, all the failed policies of neoliberalism, right? All of the failed policies of neoliberalism. Yeah, we need to cut the red tape. We need to empower business. We need to lower taxes for more investment, right? Just the supply side economics that have proven themselves to fail over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And Pierre Poilievre he's going to stand up and say to Donald Trump, there is no way that we are going to allow you to annex, but he's just going to sell Canada to the United States. Like, that's what's going to happen. He's just going to sell us out completely. Because, and he tells you so, right? Like, when they say we're going to open up for business investment, what do you think they're talking about? What do you think that actually means, right? That means that big, gigantic, powerful players in the United States are going to come and buy big sections of Canada. That's what that means. Like, we're going to eliminate red tape. Yeah, like, what do you think that means? And I think the reality is that you just have a lot of very angry, very disenfranchised people all across Canada who really do want to see Justin Trudeau gone, because I think he has proven himself to be a bad faith actor in the conversation. I don't think he's a very genuine, like, what's he actually achieved? This is one of the things that I keep asking myself, right? I keep seeing this kind of stuff popping up and going around where it's like, Justin Trudeau is stepping down. Will the legacy he built survive? What legacy exactly are we talking about? Like, what legacy precisely is it that we are actually talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about Justin Trudeau's legacy. Yep, and Lou's got it here, right? He said he regretted not doing election reform. Right? He has said that previously in the Quebec press. Now he's saying it openly. Like, people asked him and were like, is there anything that you regret during your tenure? And he just said not doing electoral reform. It's like, yeah. Like, or anything for that matter. Like, to me, this is the big emblematic truth of his tenure, is that when the Conservatives come in, they are basically going to eliminate anything that he has put forward, right? Like, across the board. And it's going to be like, because that's how the Conservatives operate. They come in with a big giant binder, they thump it on the table, they pass it as a big omnibus bill. Everybody goes, oh, this is anti, we didn't even get a chance to read it. Oh my God, it's a, even though every government acts this way. And it's essentially going to wash away the Trudeau administration. Just the Trudeau administration, it'll be as if they didn't exist, because the truth is that what did they achieve? What did they do? Like, what really is Justin Trudeau's big legacy piece? Legalized marijuana. When you walk down the street of your town now, there's a weed shop. You're like, okay, cool. There's a weed shop. Thanks, Justin. Like, that's his legacy. So, yeah, $10 a day health daycare. Whoopity-doo in Kalamazoo. Like, I mean, I guess, like, it's better than nothing. Like, for real, if your legacy is if your legacy can be surmised as better than nothing, and it's especially bad because he is a Trudeau, right? Like once you actually take a step back and frame his time as prime minister and compare it next to his father, right? Like, his father, the reason why Justin Trudeau becomes the prime minister of Canada is because of Pierre Trudeau, right? Pierre Elliott Trudeau, one of the strongest Canadian leaders. Pierre Elliott Trudeau literally gave us is the reason why we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The universal healthcare system that exists in Canada was a Trudeau Liberal Party policy, and of course you can put forward the narrative, and I think you should put forward the narrative, that it was actually Tommy Douglas and the NDP putting pressure on the Liberals that forced them to do it, but he still did it, right? Like, what's this guy managed? Like, less than anything, really. Friendly FFS says Marx does have the greatest take on gun control, but Justin banned handgun ownership. He didn't ban handgun ownership. Like, the Liberals definitely always do a sweep. Like, every so often, what the Liberals will do is do a sweep of some kind of gun control or some kind of gun legislation. But when you actually peel back into it, it's like, it's always very specific, and it's always very, like, it's aimed at something, and it's really only being done specifically to get a very small marginal group of people within their party to go, yeah, good. Guns are the problem. And it's like, So he'll ban like uh, uh, an AR-15 with an extended scope and an extra large clip specifically. Like not an AR-15, an AR-15 with an extended scope and a lengthened or a shortened snout and a lengthened magazine specifically, right? So just like or like he won't ban handguns. He'll ban like a very specific type of pistol because it's all just he doesn't actually have he doesn't actually have principles, right? He doesn't actually have like that, and I think that's the thing that's kind of emblematic of his time as prime minister. Like, if you wanted to take a look at one policy that I feel like really encapsulates who he is as a leader and a politician, it was the tax break this last Christmas. It was temporary. It wasn't very meaningful, and it was done in such a manner that made him like he expected all of us to be like, oh, thank you, Justin. Oh, great and powerful Justin. Thank you so much. But it's not like fundamental change. It's not like a real thing, right? New CI drone pilot wrote, Castro is a great man. Justin never could have lived up to his dad's legacy. I love this. I love this conspiracy theory that says Justin Trudeau is actually Castro's. That's so funny. Wouldn't that be wild if it ended up being completely true? That like right at the end of his life, he's like, yeah, I am actually Fidel Castro's son. That'd be so crazy. 1000%. Yeah, his We charity laundered hundreds of millions for himself. Yeah, I mean, Justin Trudeau is walking away from this with, I think he has a net wealth of about $50 million now. And that's more or less his achievement, right? That's more or less what he achieved for himself. Like, the carbon tax is going to get axed. That's 100% gone. And it all kind of boils down to the reality that liberals are weak, right? Liberals are weak. They're the half measure prince. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That they're not actually doing what needs to actually be done. And I somewhat respect the position that Trudeau finds himself in, where like he does have the United States like breathing down his neck, right? Like if he starts nationalizing pipelines, if he starts nationalizing infrastructure, right? If he starts nationalizing oil companies, yeah, the United States is going to do something about it, right? Lou writes, weed and maid are for the boomers. Yeah, I mean, like the boomers are still in the conversation. I'll say it over and over and over again, right? And I think it's absolutely fundamentally true, even though it's a little mean or it's a little cruel to say this. Um, Things will get better when the boomers are gone, right? There's just so many, like we're in this state of total constipation as a people, and a big piece of that puzzle of why we're so constipated is that there is this cohort of people who are just literally gumming up the works because they do not understand what's going on, uh, um, or b, fuck you, I got mine, right? Like that's really the position that we find ourselves in. No, I smoke marijuana. Like that's fine. Like there's it's not a big deal. Like this is the reason why I don't like trumpet it for Trudeau. It's like it should have never been illegal in the first place. Like really. It's literally a plant. Like you're telling me marijuana is illegal, but tobacco has always been legal? Get the fuck out of here. Right? Like Trudeau legalizing marijuana is literally like a little like, yeah, obviously. Like you might as well have criminalized roses. Like get out of here with this. Right? Like it's embarrassing that it was ever made illegal. Like that and that's kind of fundamentally where I'm at with our country and with Western civilization generally, is that we're just kind of embarrassing. Like we're a deeply unserious people. And if you want to see how deeply unserious we are, you just need to watch the interview that Jordan Peterson gave to Pierre Poilievre. It was as embarrassing as it gets. Just total brain rot, completely stupid. They were literally saying things like racism didn't exist in Canada until the woke movement came. Like, Canada has never been racist. Like, this kind of like that's Nazi shit. Like, straight up. Like, that's just Nazi shit. Like, just white supremacist garbage. Right? Yeah, because the Indian Act doesn't exist. Because we never did anything to the First Nations people. The 60s scoop never happened. Right? Nilo writes, and what he did was to privatize it, bring it out of black market capitalism into white market capitalism. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily like, it's good that we're not wasting resources like trying to hunt people down or any of that kind of stuff. But like, I know people who were producers who can't produce anymore. Right? It's so it kind of became like a weird, like there's a weird shift in the economy that's like, is it better? Are we better off this way? I would have preferred it if it had have just been like decriminalized and then left alone. Right? So instead of saying like, oh, you have to sell it specifically and it has to have this kind of token and it has to have this kind of thing and you need to jump through these hoops. Just literally be like, yeah, weed, no more. We're not going to send the cops after you. Yeah, and the police chiefs who were against it the whole time were first generation investors. Yeah, and of course. No, of course, and they knew, because they know who the producers are. Like they know who to, like they know who these people are. Right? So they know exactly who to contact, they know exactly who to talk to, they know exactly what to get involved in, right? New CIA drone pilot really wants to double down on the Justin Trudeau Fidel Castro connection. Just look at the photos. Remember how Justin paid tribute to Fidel when he died? The photos of Justin versus Fidel versus Pierre is obvious. And that photo of Justin's mom looking at Fidel with those bedroom eyes. Yeah, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm just gonna give it a like, probably not though, right? Like, Alien, bro, I'm not as confident that neoliberalism dies with the boomers. Oh no, I don't think that it dies with the boomers. I just think, like, if you look at percentages, generational percentages, it really is like, so boomers are like 75% in support of policies that are murdering their children, whereas their children are like 25% in support. I'm not saying that it's going to be the thing that sweeps it away. I'm just saying that it's like, it is a piece of that puzzle for sure. Like, and this generational split that exists on so many issues, like the Israel-Palestine issue, right? Like 70% of boomers are like, Israel is a free, independent, we got to support it. Yeah, send billions to Israel. Like 25% of Gen Z are like, Palestine is being genocided. So it's just like a very clear and obvious divide between these two particular worldviews. And I'm not saying that the boomers dying off means that the neoliberal era will go away forever. There are many other pieces. Most importantly is just the class system itself, right? That, yeah, there'll be a generation of millennials and a generation of Gen Z capitalists, pigs, right? Just total asshole losers. Like, when Elon Musk dies, thankfully, the people who take over from him will be just as stupid and nefarious and ridiculous, right? Because, like, does it get stupider than this batch of oligarchs that we have now? Like, this batch of, like, these guys are morons, right? Like, the more you listen to them speak and the more you see the things that they actually do, and that they spend their time doing, the stupider they get. Like, the oligarchs of old would actually build things like Carnegie Hall or train stations, big skyscrapers and buildings, infrastructure, right? They fundamentally understood that they needed to somehow justify their position in the society, and that by actually involving themselves in the improvement of that society in legitimate ways, and not these extremely abstract ways that these guys involve themselves in, that's the thing to do in order to, maintain some kind of respect and prestige in the society. These guys are morons. They don't understand that at all. They just assume they should be thought of slavishly, that we should be slavishly worshiping them because they're rich and for no other reason. Like, Elon genuinely thinks that, like, buying Twitter is a win for him. Like, Bezos actually thinks that we're all looking at him being shot into space going, wow, what an entrepreneur. Instead of just like a dim-witted child who's like treating this like it's a carnival fun ride. Right? Like, these people are despicable and we hate them. Like, every single time Peter Thiel opens his mouth, I'm just like, that guy's a fucking Nazi. Because he is. And they are. Like Zuckerberg's a fucking creep and a weirdo. And every single time these guys speak, they just make it more and more clear to us that the thing for us to do is remove their power from the society. That they're not helping. And in fact, they're quite harmful. So, and the next batch, right, pulling it back to the generational conversation, right? So once these guys thankfully die, because the universe has mercy in that way, right, it will eventually kill these losers off. Well, the next batch will be not just as stupid as them, but also childish, right? Just dim-witted children who have never actually encountered a moment's hardship in their life, utterly disconnected and dislocated from anything even remotely resembling reality. And we will look at these people and be like, under what, like, you have no authority. Like, what are you talking about? Right? And so the seeds of revolution are just built into the structure of the society. That eventually these grotesque, childish pigs will start to do things into the society that are so obviously just disgusting and so publicly done that someone's going to get Luigi'd and we'll all just be like, awesome. That's awesome and cool that guy got Luigi'd. We love that. And like the police will like go around and ask people like, who did that? And we'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? So like that to me is the true end of all of this, is that eventually the police are just not going to have authority. No one's going to respect them. Like, if your child starts to say, I want to be a police officer, you will reprimand them and say, you will not. Those people are fascists. Right? You might as well be a fucking stormtrooper. Like, and that to me is the end of the whole project. Once people begin to stop participating in it. Once people stop becoming cops, once people stop becoming FBI agents, once people stop joining the CIA, once people stop joining the military, once it's just fully understood that these organizations are harmful and should die off, right? That's how the whole project comes apart. I didn't read the full comment from Leon here, so the Marxist take would be that people's politics come from their economic position. Gen X are reactionary. Millennials are voting right. No, I tend to agree with you. Like I'm saying, it's not the full, complete picture. I'm not saying that it's 100% the truth, but it definitely is the case that that's going to have an impact. Because once the boomers start dying, their wealth isn't going to go to their children, right? Like the wealth is going to be vacuumed upwards. It's just being vacuumed upwards constantly. And when the boomers die, it'll just get vacuumed and vacuumed and vacuumed. Omnicidal tendencies. John is a confirmed shill trying to downplay the Justin Fidel connection. Next, he'll say that Ted Cruz is totally not the Zodiac killer. Wouldn't that be wild if Ted Cruz did end up being the Zodiac killer? That'd be wild. Aelion says, if another round of primitive accumulation can loop millennials into capital ownership, they can be swayed. I just think that, like, again, it's a much smaller portion. Like the boomer generation was kind of brought into it. Right, that they experienced sort of the end result of the New Deal legislation, and they experienced a life that doesn't exist anymore, right? They experienced a type of economy that no longer exists. And so because they had that experience, they're sort of riding this wave. Like, what? Just go shake his hand. Just shake his hand and look him in the eye and tell him you're a good worker and you'll be the president of the company. That kind of dumb thinking that just doesn't exist anymore. Like, and the fact that I know that we say that with a kind of a flippancy, right? But that's a legitimate thing that happened. Like my dad was a business owner, and his longest held employee, who I think he became quite good friends with ultimately, was literally a dude who walked in his front door with no experience whatsoever and shook his hand and said, I'm a good worker. And he hired the guy and then trained the guy from nothing. And it's just like, that would literally never happen today, ever. Ever. That you would need to walk in there and be like, I have a master's degree in this, and you'd get like an entry-level job for it. So you'd need to do like 5 years of schooling before you could even walk in the door to the place, let alone get an interview. So everything is different now, and the boomers are just dislocated from it. They're just not connected to it at all. Like at all, even remotely a little. So just the fact that there is this like complete and total utter lived experience that's going to die off is going to improve things. And then when that cohort dies off, the wealth that they have isn't going to just one-to-one go down to the next generation. It's literally going to be packaged into a ball and handed to one person. And that one person will be a millennial or a Gen Z or someone, and they'll be like, oh, I earned this. And then they're going to do a bunch of really dumb shit because they're too stupid to understand what they look like. They'll have no self-awareness. Right? Like they'll have like literally no self-awareness. And they're going to do it in a society that despises them. Like we're going to look at that guy and there's going to be the mass of us, like literally 90% of us are going to look at that guy and be like, oh, you're a fucking Nazi. Yeah, bye-bye to this. Right? Because what we're experiencing with Donald Trump right now is the beginning of it. Right? It's the beginning of this shift away. Like, it has been the case for some time now that the United States has not actually been a democracy. Like, it has been the case that that is the truth, but now it's going to be open about it. Like, I think that's a big shift that is going to happen in the perspective and the perception of what's going to happen moving forward. That, like, this group of clowns are just going to rule openly. And they're not going to pretend as though they give a shit about any idea of democracy. They don't give a fuck at all. Most of them are extremely anti-democratic, openly. And so the idea, like, and it's going to just continue. It's going to perpetuate. It's just going to continue this way. Leon says, I think you're right that capital will try to acquire the wealth of boomers and most of it won't transfer. Yeah, that's absolutely what's going to happen, right? They're not going to let us have our parents' wealth. Absolutely not. Anemone, good to see you. June, good to see you too. Eggs D writes, tomorrow is my birthday. Happy birthday to you. It's also the birthday of Kim Jong-un. So tomorrow I will express my solidarity with the people of the DPRK. Well, isn't that nice? Good evening to you, Dave. Good to see you. Yeah, happy birthday to you, bud. I hope you do something. My birthday was yesterday. Yeah. Happy Insurrection Day. Yeah. It's nice that the insurrection happened on the 6th of January. So that now I get to celebrate my birthday along with the insurrection of the White House. Yeah. Happy Insurrection Day. So lovely. Anemone, happy birthday, John. Mine was on the 27th. Lots of birthdays. Happy birthday to you, Anemone. Good. Yeah, we're all, look at us. Look at us, stalwart Capricorns. Are we all Capricorns? Is everybody in here Capricorns? We're all just a bunch of Capricorns coming together, just being like a bunch of Capricorns. Dude, that would actually be wild if we all just if we all found out collectively together that, oh yeah, we're all Capricorns. Year of the Snake. Year of the Snake. Well, that makes sense because Capital is a snake eating its own tail. June's a Scorpio. Very good, June. Very good, June. Hold on. Let's have some fun. How do Scorpio and Capricorn get along? It knows exactly what I'm asking. Compatibility. 7 out of 10. Pretty good. Decent. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give it the 7 out of 10. That's fine. Taurus Thug Life. Libra here to poop the party. Very good. A wide array. Oh, goodness. So I'm going to flip over to... Oh, yes. Let's have a little mock of this one. I want to talk about this one. This is so, in your, weekly reminder that the propaganda system thinks that you're a just really stupid person, right? This is how stupid they think we are. And the trouble is that there is, a large enough cohort of people in the society that are this stupid. For those of you who are listening at home, Kim Jong-un bans hot dogs for North Koreans, cooking them an act of treason. This has been spread around all of the papers, right? The New York Times, everybody, what is it? It's the New Zealand Herald is doing this one. So they're all reporting on this. What's the source? When you actually read the article, right? When you actually read the article, the source is the CIA. So the CIA said that Kim Jong-un bans hot dogs for North Koreans. When the answer is probably not. Probably not, right? Imagine banning sausages. What are you even talking about? And then I bet you if you actually dug into the story proper and you actually found, is there a kernel of truth to this kind of thing, you would find out that what it actually was is that there was an outbreak of some kind of disease on a pig farm. And so they had to quarantine the pig farm and then get rid of a bunch of pigs. And then they took a bunch of those sausages off the market, right? For public health reasons, like every country in the history of man has ever done. Kim Jong-un bans hot dogs. It's such a stupid headline. But they think we're this stupid. That's the thing. They think that we'll believe, they've banned certain haircuts. You have to get the 13 approved haircuts. They genuinely think that and if the thing that's so crazy is you see this stuff spread around on just like the normie subreddits or this, and you see the comments and you're like, oh, you people are just stupid. Like, you actually are this dim-witted. Like, you think that this is like a cartoon. And it's unbelievable to watch. Kim Jong-un bans insert niche thing from North American culture. Like, yeah, the CIA says it. It must be true. Exactly. Like, people still don't know that, like, Radio Free Asia is the CIA. Like, they just don't know. Marcus Smith, good to see you, bud, writes, what a communist dictator for not letting capitalists sell contaminated sausages to the public. Yeah. Like, and meanwhile, didn't South Korea just have like a coup attempt? Like, and the weakest coup attempt you've ever seen? Didn't the president of South Korea just try to coup the government there and fail? Like, if there was a coup in North Korea, they would do it right. They wouldn't dick around with that. June says, source is always either 1, unnamed, yeah, 2, some other Western media, or 3, some North Korean state-owned media that they may name but never provide a link to. Yeah, but at what cost? Marcus Smith says, did I miss the Trudeau take? Yeah, we spent the first half hour talking about Justin Trudeau's resignation. Although, I mean, I assume we're going to circle back on that. Just mainly because, like, Trump has been asked straightforwardly. Trump threatens economic, not military force to annex Canada. Like, concerning. If I'm Canada, and I've said it before, I'll say it to politicians, I'll say it to everybody. We should have our own productive capacity here in Canada. We should not be linking our economic future and our economic capability to America. We just shouldn't. Like, we should be able to produce our own goods, and we should be able to sell those goods on the world stage without America's permission. Because that's the actual power that America has over Canada. Is that Canada has raw goods and raw materials, but we don't produce. We don't change them into anything. We don't manufacture anything. And that has made us very weak. We have to vassalize ourselves, essentially. And if we end up with a lord who is cruel and vindictive and short-sighted and dim-witted, like Trump is, well, we can do pretty big harm to us. Marcus writes, surely you can trust that the Americans only intend to use economic embargoes and to manufacture famines instead of real violence. Yes, of course. Yeah, they're not going to do violence to us. They're just going to starve us. Like, yeah. So just at the end of the day, like, we should stop trusting the Americans. Like, and these are more signs of the decline of the empire, right? That when Trump stands up and actually, like, threatens to do this stuff, right? Like, when Trump stands up and actually threatens to invade Mexico and invade Panama and invade Greenland and like isn't it interesting how all of the stuff that America used to be doing over there, right? What they used to be doing on in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, it suddenly became in Western Europe, and now suddenly it's literally in their neighbors, right? So it's all coming home, right? It's all coming home, and eventually it will be Ohio, you have to do this. Tennessee, you have to do that. Texas, you have to do that. And it is going to be the same kind of treatment that we have been inflicting on people all over the world. And so this is the beginning of that dark chapter. This is the beginning of the dark chapter of Canadian and American history and European history. That we are entering in a period of time where all of the terrorism and all of the violence and all the sanctioning and all of the militarism that we've done throughout the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, Asia, we're going to begin doing to ourselves. And our leadership is going to begin enacting those policies against us. And Donald Trump and these and more importantly, these Republicans and Democrats are absolutely ushering that era in, because this system of neoliberal capital, the system of global capital, is now no longer working in the interests in their interests. And so they're going into a period of consolidation, and they're becoming very conciliatory, and they're more concerned about their own personal security and their own personal wealth and their own personal bubble. And they don't care about us, and they never did. And so to protect themselves from us, the peasantry, things will just become more and more obviously violent. And they'll hire mercenary groups, and you'll have like Musktopia, and you'll have like Bezos towns. Like you'll all of that shit's coming. Like all that infrastructure is already being erected. All of that stuff is being built in front of our eyes right now. And eventually America is not going to be able to influence much out in the world. That America is just going to be essentially a terrorist organization, if it isn't already perceived that way. Trying to influence world powers and trying to influence world events through acts of terrorism, essentially, and funding terrorist groups. Right-wing juntas and literal Nazis like the Azov Battalion, and this is how America is going to interact with the rest of the world. And in their attempt to control their own populations, well, they'll use exactly the same tactics that they were using in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Libya, Sudan, right? Like all of this shit. Nilo says it's good to see trouble in paradise. I mean, it's going to be trouble for sure. And all of that, it's sort of creepy to watch the Petersons of the world say that Canada isn't racist. It's like, yeah, wait for it, buddy. Like, Jesus Christ. Dave says, there's a guy at work told me if we became part of the USA, at least all cities across Canada would have a better chance to win the Stanley Cup. Yeah, dude, your coworker is bought in, eh? Like, just bread and circuses, right? Just bread and circuses. That's all it takes, right? Marcus says, I'm pretty sure the U.S. has invaded Panama, Grenada, and Honduras with conventional forces just in our lifetimes. I don't know why people are making it sound crazy. Because, look, every generation needs to learn this lesson, right? Every generation learns the lesson. And the hope is that generation by generation, when we go like when we go through a tragedy like Vietnam, there's a hope that we'll all look at one another and be like, we're not doing that again, right? But the truth is that we keep having babies, and those babies come up and they go through a capitalist education system. And the hope from the capitalist class is that they'll be able to put guns in the hands of those babies and send them off to war, and the babies will be like, I am a righteous and true capitalist fighter. Like, that's the goal. And so as people die off, the new batch comes in and they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Like, it's been really fascinating listening to Iraq war vets talking about their time in Iraq and listening to them come to these realizations of like, oh, I was just there to secure oil. I was just there because a politician had an idea. Like, I wasn't there to help anybody or do anything useful or to fight for justice or spread democracy or any of that stuff. And like, you see these guys and they have this kind of like dawning realization, and it's like, yeah, bud, like I told you, like I was saying this, like you guys all got on your high horse and were like, rah, rah, off we go. And I literally am just standing here being like, Okay, took you 20 years and you had to murder a bunch of people, but you figured it out. Like, congratulations. Like, congratulations. But that's the power of the propaganda system. That the reason why they propagandize us so thoroughly and so efficaciously so often is uh, uh, is because it works. Is because they begin when you're 5, even younger, really. But they jam you through a system that traumatizes you into the belief that you are part of this great country, and you're not. The country that you're a part of is this fascist death cult that's destroying everything around it and is going to destroy itself. And the justifications they use are often things like, but look how much wealth and power we have. It's like, yeah, of course you have wealth and power. You stripped it from everybody else. And so every generation has to figure it out. And the hope is that we'll figure it out faster. But, I mean, I think the big win that's happening for the younger generation is that gone is this idea that, like, the CIA is this, like, what are you talking about, conspiracy theorist, tinfoil helmet guy? Like, that's gone. Like, if you're under the age of 30 and you're still talking that way, then I think you have a mental illness. Like, straight up, I think you're the one with the mental illness if you're actually saying that the CIA isn't part of the whole operation, right? Like, within my lifetime, when I was 20, if I started talking about the CIA when I was 20, people were like, what? What a weirdo. Now, if somebody acts that way, I just get to look them dead ass and be like, what are you, a baby? The Central Intelligence Agency, it's overthrown dozens of governments, literally bombs the shit out of people, was the reason we invaded Iraq. Like, what are you, stupid? And the answer is yes, obviously, they're stupid. But this, like, incredulous disbelief is gone. That if you start talking about the CIA, people are like, maybe you'll get a person who's like, little skeptical. They need a little bit more proof. And you can often just show them the CIA website and be like, the CIA confessed to this in 1974. Like, it's on their website. But the fact that incredulous disbelief is gone, and that most people are willing to hear out and listen to the reality that there is a terrorist organization in their country that is inflicting death and mayhem across the country, is a big win. It's a huge shift in public perception. Like, the CIA doesn't want to be in a position where it is thought of. It wants to be a clandestine, secretive, behind the scenes, never really thought of organization. And so if you have an entire generation of people who are like, when a world event happens, the first thing they think is, what's the CIA doing? That changes the narrative a lot. And I think that's a big reason why the American empire has declined pretty rapidly across the rest of the globe, and why you're seeing countries able to really legitimately defend themselves in serious ways. Like, Fidel Castro was able to defend himself from America and the CIA because he was aware of it. Because he held awareness. He was sitting there with this sense of awareness that, okay, there's an organization, the CIA. I take it seriously. It is real. It is not a conspiracy theory. When I see things happen, I think the CIA is involved. How do we defend ourselves? Right? But then you take a look at, like, African history, the history of, like, Latin America. You take a look, and quite often there's these coups and these overthrows, and the people who get couped and overthrown are just like, what is, I don't understand. Like, when Allende is overthrown, one of his, like, final statements was asking for Pinochet, was asking, like, I hope Pinochet's okay. Right? Where's Pinochet? He can help us. So he just completely was unaware of even the possibility that the CIA is involved in this. And I think that that's all gone now. That the African nations and the Latin America and the Middle East and Asia and all these guys are just like the first thing they're thinking is where's the CIA? And so that's the reason why the coups aren't working anymore. That's why it failed in the Congo. That's why their actions are not as effective as they once were. Because people have an awareness of the existence of this organization that is obviously a terrorist organization and operates for the interests of itself and a small handful of psychopaths and no one else. Dave writes, at this point, you cannot expect the USA empire would last for another 100 years. I don't think they can last for another 10 years. I mean, yeah, empires don't just like blip, right? They don't just like go like bump and then they're gone. Like it's going to be like it's going to be a steady withdrawal. It'll be a steady kind of removal. And there's always going to be like infrastructure. There's always going to be like remnants, right? Like a country will have an embassy that is an American embassy, and it's literally open and there's one guy that works there. And it's like considered American soil, but nobody takes it seriously. And if the embassy said something to the people, nobody would care. Right? Like that, so it ends up being just kind of this like remnant of the past where people understand it has no power. But it's like there. And nobody's bothering to do anything about it. No, I suspect that like technically speaking, the American empire will likely persist for, like 100 years for sure. But like there's going to be so many internal collapses and so much internal turmoil and so many withdrawals from their bases overseas and all of this, and so much dysfunction and so much disorganization and so much insanity due to just the cultish nature of the psychopath class, that the entire rest of the world is going to look to more stable options. And all of that's going to happen over, like 100-year period. Like it's going to be a big, long period. I think that the prestige of America has already experienced a fairly major decline. Like globally speaking, I think everybody understands that America is a Nazi state. I think it's pretty well understood. Like if you're living in the Middle East, it's certainly the case, right? Like if you're living in Russia, you don't have a good opinion of America right now. If you're living in Africa, you don't have a good opinion of America right now, right? Like I think the entire rest of the world is pivoting over to what they see as more stable options, and those stable options are Russia and China. And it looks like China especially, but also Russia, are being governed in a way that that you describe as stable, that they look reasonable. It doesn't look like they're gonna suddenly take a left turn and go do a crazy thing. I've said it over and over again on this channel, and I think it's absolutely the truth, that people will choose a country that they disagree with, whose policies they disagree with, but is stable, over one who perhaps in their rhetoric you might agree with, but they are unstable, right? Like I would rather have a friend who I disagree with in their politics, but who is stable and who does what they say they're going to do, than somebody who will like be like, yeah, buddy, you're absolutely right in everything you say, and like a good drinking buddy and all this kind of stuff, but then fucks me over the second that they think they can get a coin out of me. Right? And I think that that's just what's going on in the world. People, like, if you're a country that maybe you do think China is an authoritarian dictatorship, maybe you are looking at China and just going like, yeah, this is Xi Jinping is a dictator, and he purged the party yeah, he said it was corruption that he was purging the party of, but it really was political opponents he was getting rid of so that he could consolidate power and all this kind of stuff. Well, you're still going to do business with him. You're still going to deal with him. Why? Because when he says he's going to do something, he does it. And the things that they say that they're going to do are like not that insane, or not that like, we're going to build a rail system. We're going to increase our military capacity. And you're like, military capacity kind of scary, but like, what are you doing with that military capacity? It's like defending ourselves from who? Those psychos. Oh yeah. Sounds reasonable. And all of this is going to unfold over like a long stretch of time. And there's going to be big key point moments. Like, big key point moments are going to be when Xi Jinping retires, when Vladimir Putin retires, when Modi retires. Like, the new guard, like the new crop of politicians that come in, like, it could change things pretty dramatically. And then, of course, there's the discourse of, like, what's going to happen to the Democratic Party? What's going to happen to the Republican Party? Like, the real genie in the bottle, like the real Pandora's box that has been opened with Donald Trump is the new crop of politicians that he has allowed in the door. Like the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Boeberts and like the Matt Gaetzes of the Ted Cruzes of the conversation, right? Like that, just these absolutely like spineless, despicable, narcissistic fascists. And there's this whole crop of them now that the neocons at least were talking a game of like, we got to go after the oil in the Middle East and to secure domestic production. But like, these guys are just like fucking nuts. Like, they're insane. They're talking about like actually deporting huge sections of their workforce, as if that's going to be good for the American economy. Nilo writes, Polyev says Canada will never be the 51st state. Should be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, I mean, what Pierre Polyev will do, because we know what he is. He's a neoliberal capitalist who works on behalf of Stephen Harper and the organization that Stephen Harper runs with all of his Zionist buddies. So what he's going to do is he's going to maintain the political integrity of the Canadian system, but just sell us to America, right? That's what he's going to do. And how do we know that's true? Because that's what he says he's going to do, right? Like, when he talks about opening up investment opportunities in Canada, like, what do you think he's talking about? Like, for God's sakes, like, Tim Hortons is owned by Americans. Like what part of Canada is actually economically independent? Is there a part? Gabriel writes, I don't think America knows how to stop China's ascension, so they're just flinging their fists everywhere. Yeah, I think it's consolidation, right? Like, that's really what it is that I think that there is a new guard of political analysts coming in, that the neocons have finally been defeated. Like, this is something that I don't think is well discussed or well understood. And I think that that's for a reason. I think that's on purpose, because nobody actually wants to discuss the reality that America's political life was taken over by neocons, that the neocons were defeated in the Republican Party by Donald Trump, right? That the whole neocon idea was pushed out of the party. And where did it go? It went to the Democratic Party. And they rallied under Biden, who was absolutely happy to work with the neocons. And then they rallied under Kamala Harris, and then they were defeated. And so you have a new perspective that has come into the White House, the Congress, the Senate. You have this new political perspective that is willing to actually say out loud, yeah, we've lost. Like, we've actually lost. Like, we've lost in Ukraine. We're losing in the Middle East. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to actually do anything to China that in a serious way. Like, our Taiwan ploy is not going to work, right? And instead of just pig-headedly moving forward anyway, they're saying, okay, well, what can we do? Like, what can we actually do about this? And so the thing that they're realizing is like, okay, cool. So this is a wash. We can't do anything about this anymore, but we can consolidate power in our own hemisphere, right? We can consolidate power in our own hemisphere, and we can tighten ourselves up, and we can say, okay, cool. Like, we don't want, we're going to push China out of all this, and we're going to consolidate power and authority. We're going to try to build up our own manufacturing base. We're going to try to get disconnected from China, right? Which I mean, I think that's actually wise. Like, it's a foolish thing to hinge your economy on a foreign power. Like, you should have domestic production. like the fact that needs to be said, it just shows you how embarrassing these capitalists actually are. Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to pin all of our hopes and dreams on Tennessee. And if Tennessee decides to fuck us over, then we're fucked. We're totally fucked. But they won't. Right? They won't. Inverted Mystic, good to see you. And I think that this consolidation of power is going to be described as isolationism. But really, it's just a sign that, like, all of this adventurism has finally come to an end. They can't continue. They just can't. Like, it's just a fart joke at this point. And it's not leading anywhere, and it's not actually doing anything. Okay, I need to go use the washroom for a second, guys. Please stick around. Good to see all of you. We'll continue reading your comments and talking. Just one moment. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. But nature calls. Oh. And when nature calls, you must listen. You must listen. Nilo writes, seems like Trump is trying to balkanize the rest before being balkanized themselves. But I think that that's what this is all about. It's an effort to prevent the balkanization process. It's an effort to say, hey, Canada, you are not going to break off and do trade with China or anybody else. You're doing trade with us. If you fuck around, you're going to find out. We got a 25% tariff up in line for you. And that would cripple Canada. For sure, it would cripple Canada. So it's a way for the United States to say, hey, you're with us. You're not with anybody else. Hey, Mexico, you're with us. You're not with anybody else. Hey, the Panama Canal, you're not sending Chinese ships through there. You're with us. You're not with anybody else. Right? It's just tightening it all up in the hopes that tightening up will keep things together. But the truth is that the United States and Canada are about to hit an economic wall. Like, we're about to hit an economic wall in a big way. And we're going to hit that economic wall simply because the primacy of the dollar is ended. Like, it's ended. And those dominoes are already falling. And so, and like the Trump administration and the Republicans know it. The dominoes are falling. They know they're falling. The cheap free goods that they've been receiving in exchange for nothing is going to end. It's just going to end. And so goods are going to dry up. You're going to see shortages. You're going to see this kind of stuff happen. Like, it's for sure going to happen. And you're going to see entire workforces laid off. You're going to see shipping truckers, all of this, all huge, like I'm talking millions of people are going to be laid off. It's going to be it's going to be like a sweeping domino effect where whole industries are going to restructure and lay people off, and that's going to lead to another industry laying off, and it's going to lead to another industry laying off. Right? It's just going to be this cascading, sweeping effect that happens throughout America. And they know it's coming, they know it's happening, and they know they can't stop it. And why is it happening? Because the entire rest of the world is turning to the Americans and saying, do you have anything other to offer us than paper money and bombs? And the answer is no. America does not have anything other than bombs and paper money. And that's the hard truth of what's going on to America. So America is trying to shore up its allies and shore all of this up so that they don't collapse in isolation. They want everybody else to go down with them. They don't want Canada to be like, oh shit, America's collapsing. Hey, China. 0% of that they want. Maybe he's trying to peel off Alberta. No, I think, like, Canada doesn't have that big a population. Like, we have 40 million people at the top end. Like, that's less than the population of New York, right? So as far as the States is concerned, they can push us around, and they are pushing us around. Like, this is a little moment where, like, Mo, Curly, and Shem, whatever his name is, right? No, Mo, Larry, and Curly are all fighting with each other. That's what's going on. Oh, somebody with a donation. Wix. Thank you, Wix. I appreciate it. I promise you the new camera is coming, friend. I promise. Wix gave a very big donation fairly recently, and I've been trying to buy the camera. I tried to buy it several times, and the bank shut down my account. I had to, like, literally call them and be like, hey, can you not have done that? And so now I'm, like, going to buy the camera again. Wix, look, tell me the camera that I should buy, and I will buy that camera. I know I've asked you this several times. Wait, you sent me an email. Never mind. You sent me an email. It's happening. It's going to happen right after this stream. I'm sure of it. Jesus Christ. Ugh. Marcus writes, the U.S. And I should finish, Wix. Thank you again for the $10 donation, my man. I really do appreciate it. Not necessarily for the financial support, but just for, like, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good. Honestly, guys, it makes me feel so good to know that you come in here and we all have this little moment together. To know that every single week we're all gonna, like, come into this space and collectively share this just, like, moment of, like, okay. Like, a moment of crystallization is what I hope to achieve. That we all can just come together and have, like, a crystallized moment of, like, okay, that this is the nonsense and this is the truth. And that we can come to a consensus about what the truth actually is. So that we can go out into our lives and actually survive. Marcus writes, the U.S. has killed more people in the Middle East this century than they did in Vietnam. Yeah, it just looks like their eyes are turning to the side of the continent this time around. Yeah. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled, Charles Baudelaire, yeah, is that he didn't exist. Exactly. June trying to get around the YouTube censor. I, for one, support a more equitable distribution of the wealth that was stolen from Iraq. Yeah, I think that's right. Isaac, good to see you. I'm late being busy exploited by capitalism. Yeah, aren't we all? Eggs D writes, people have given the United States far too much benefit of the doubt for too long. Yeah, I think that's really the truth. there's a bit of that as well. Like, it's the same story that I tell with like the CIA. Like, for a long time, there's people overseas, and you still encounter these people, right? They'll say they'll say something like, America is still the land of freedom, right? And you're just like, I don't know about that, bud. Like, I don't know about that, bud. I think that the propaganda is working. Inverted says, truth is, if you want people to become a communist, make them work fast food for a month or a year. No, I mean, I do think that service work is an important thing. I think that there's a lot of people who have sort of this haughty attitude against service work. And I think that's really where the big narrative of like, oh, you want service workers to be paid better? It's just such an easy job for lazy people. It's like, yeah, cool. You've never worked a day of it. I don't think you'd survive. Right? And I've said that to people. Like, oh yeah, I don't think you would survive in service work. Like, go try that. Right? Like, the thing that I think would kill most people in service work is that, like, to survive in service, you have to be a master of de-escalation. Like, that's the real skill. Because your actual job isn't getting food into people's hands, right? That's not the actual job. Your actual job is dealing with the public. And the public is just insane. Like, these people are nuts. And you constantly meet people who are just absolutely out of their fucking mind. Right? And your task is to be able to withstand them and de-escalate them, and then make them feel like, and then when they move on, make them feel like that was fine. That was a fine thing that just happened, right? At the very least, a fine thing that just happened. And I'm fortunate in my service work because of who I am, which is a stout, like, solid, straight white man. And I've seen it. When I was first in service, I fell into that trap of not believing it because of the privilege that I had, right? White male privilege, right? Where I just assumed that everybody talked to everybody like the way they talk to me. And then women, right, especially small women, would talk to me about it. And at first I would be kind of like, what? What? And then I started to watch. I started to see it. And I started to notice it when I would step in and begin a conversation. That a person would literally be condescendingly browbeating, especially like a recent immigrant, right? A female recent immigrant. They'd be browbeating them and like really coming down on them. And then I would step in and they would turn and look at me, straight white male. And it was like a switch flipped. And they were like, oh, finally, a human person I can talk to. And immediately just like, right? And that's like, so dealing with the public is not easy. It's not a nice experience. You can make it a nice experience, right? But that takes time and a skill, and you have to develop it. And I for sure see people in service now, and I'm like, oh man, you're making this job way harder on yourself than you need to, right? You're being too forceful and too aggressive and too, like, not accommodating enough and not welcoming enough. But to do that, you have to humble yourself, right? There's a humility that comes to it too. And you end up talking to like a construction worker, or some guy who's a trucker or something like this, right? Or an office worker or any of that kind of stuff. And you can tell just by their tone and their brashness and the way they swagger about and all this kind of stuff, because they spend most of their day alone by themselves, right? And they'll say something stupid about service work, and I'll just say to them, like, I don't think you'd do well. I don't think you'd last. Because they just don't have respect. Malibu Country, hey, will you leave the country if you become part of the USA? I mean, look, what's that process actually look like? Right? I just don't think that that's a serious thing that's actually going to happen. Like, certainly not going to be a flipping of the switch. So, Dave writes, don't forget 9/11 happened during that time too. Yeah, a lot of the soldiers were thinking about doing the right thing, but unfortunately figured out later in their lives it wasn't the case. Yeah. Just don't believe the military. Like, just don't believe them. Richard, good to see you. I heard that Justin Trudeau was going to resign as PM soon. Canadians must be in mourning. Justin Trudeau has resigned, in fact. That happened actually just yesterday morning. Donald Trump made this statement, which really kind of shows you his the quality of man. Many people in Canada love being the 51st state. The United States can no longer suffer the massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. If Canada merged with the US, there would be no tariffs. Taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be. Pretty wild. Pretty wild, I think. Anemone writes, England still uses roads first established by the Romans. Yeah. Like, the signs of the empire never really go away. Especially the stuff that they actually build, you know? And in the American case, it's like, I guess that means it's military bases. So what'll they turn, like, traditionally what those things get turned into are museums. So you'll have all of these museums everywhere. Peanut Butter Beatrice says, look to the Dutch and British empires to get some idea what will become. Yeah. Joe writes, they don't seem to think they're losing. I mean, there's a withdrawal happening. Joe Anthony says, because we're a sick, overindulgent culture with backward views. That's it. Baby Carrot? Did I miss somebody? Did I miss a comment here? Oh, well. Joni, how you doing? Hey, John, how's the vibe in Canada with Justin out? I think that the vibe is generally tense. I've been seeing more and more people, like, when you see non-politically connected people talking about it, I've been noticing this, that there's more people who've been getting on social media and more people who have been discussing just the kind of vibes, right? Because that's how most people live their lives, right? It's just kind of through vibes. And they don't actually have like a political understanding. They're not really connected to politics in a serious way. They're not like me, right? They're not like a politics wonk. They don't spend a lot of time reading newspapers. And they're saying like everybody's really tense. There's a lot of tension going around. Everybody's got this kind of like, ugh. And it's like, yeah, because we all know intrinsically in our hearts, like we all know the thing's coming apart, right? We don't necessarily know why, but like you see a lot of Bo Burnham floating around now. You see a lot of like Ronnie Chang just did a bit where he talked about the decline of America, like and so people are discussing it, and it's getting into the discourse. And you see more and more people putting forward more and more articulations of like for example, that Princeton study that was done that showed that, yeah, the system in America does not respond to the people at all, right? And you see prominent people discussing that in big and serious ways. And so I think people understand that all of the thoughts and ideals and the way we used to think about how our country was is ending. And in many ways, Donald Trump is sort of the emblem of that. Like people are looking at it being like, that is not what I thought my country was. And it is what your country is. It is what your country is. And so everybody's having this like kind of big recalibration. And so the vibe is tense because nobody knows what's going to happen. And nobody knows what's happening next. And things are now being suggested by Donald Trump that nobody was even considering. Nobody was sitting there thinking like America's talking about annexing Canada, annexing Greenland, doing a soft invasion of Mexico, invading Panama. Like these are things that people weren't even contemplating. They weren't even on the radar. And people are sort of hoping that things will calm down, but they're not. They're not calming down. And in fact, all of the horror and the terror that they've been hearing about overseas now is getting closer. It's coming closer. And it's going to get closer and closer and closer and closer until finally it's in your city and in your neighborhood. And that's why people are tense. That's why people are scared. Because there's this looming, like, Jason-style threat just marching towards them. Just steadily marching towards them. And they don't know what to do about it. Long Defiant writes, nukes equal hubris. I should say so, yeah. Wick says, what a start to the year. Thanks for everything, John. By the way, I sent you an email. Yeah, thank you, Wick. I appreciate it. You're very kind to me, Wick. I appreciate it. I'm just catching up with the chat here. Nilo writes, the tariffs are also designed to force business who want access to the American market to onshore operations in the U.S. if they want to avoid paying the tariff. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to have multiple effects. And, like, right now, I think it's primarily just a threat. Like, it's just a threat. And I do tend to agree with you that I think the Americans finally have put two and two together. And, you know, maybe somebody in somewhere, anywhere, actually picked up a copy of Marx and was like, oh, it's the means of production. Oh, if you don't control the means of production, then you don't have any power. So how do we get the means of production back in? But that's going to take decades, right? Like when the foreign markets moved into China, it didn't happen overnight. It took decades. Like, it took them a long, long time to shift operations in such a way. And the same is going to be true should those operations shift back into America. But now, of course, the strategy, and you take a look at Musk and his recent kerfuffle with these H-1 visas and all this kind of stuff, like, their strategy is to have operations, but then to import workers, right? Because they don't want to pay and educate Americans who expect to have a certain quality of life. They want slaves. That's who they want. Joe says, the thing is, we don't have to let people suffer when the inevitable comes. Yeah. I mean, that's what makes this whole thing so damn foolish, right? We have all these resources. We have all this capability. We have a substantial population base. We've got everything we need. Like, we've got everything we need. There's no reason for anyone to be put in a position where they're struggling or they're suffering, right? But the issue is, of course, and I've got it on the screen now. We've got an orca, just telling the truth, right? Attacking the rich is not envy. It is self-defense. The hoarding of wealth is the cause of poverty. The rich aren't just indifferent to poverty. They create it and maintain it. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to see a society that has everything it needs to stabilize itself and to give everyone a decent life. And instead of that, we're just going to watch a small handful of psychopaths make a ton of money while the rest of us are thrown into the streets. Like, that's what's coming. Because the ruling class of our country is psychotic. They've lost the thread of reality. They don't live. And I genuinely do think that there is a good, healthy percentage of them that enjoy the suffering. Like, I'm to that point. Like, I don't believe these people are just indifferent, clueless dimwits, right? I think that some of them are literally like, how do I hurt people? How do I find children to make them cry and suffer? Right? I genuinely think that's true. Like, the existence of Epstein Island should tell you that that's true. Long Defiant, aren't capitalists the great innovators? Can't they innovate themselves out of this situation? Yeah. The only things that capitalists innovate are new ways to continue the process of enslavement. Yeah, Inverted Mystic says, all I'm saying is no worker should be put down another worker who isn't committing crime to make a wage. Yeah. Can't even say a living at this point. Yeah, I don't know why workers are shitting on each other at all, right? Like, everybody's just trying to make it work and just trying to eke it out. Malibu Country writes, why do you think investment in indoor farms is not prioritized by either investors or public policy? Because it doesn't immediately make money for 5 people. And Malibu, you're going to find that that's usually the answer, right? Like, it's just not going to make money for 5 people, and those 5 people are the only people that matter, right? So it's a good idea. You would think it would be something that would be done, but if it doesn't make money for Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, then who gives a fuck? Like, literally 200 million people could be in support of that, and it just won't happen because that's how the system actually operates, right? And the truth is that, like, a guy like Bill Gates is the largest agricultural farmer in America. So why would he ever support such an idea, such a policy? Why would he ever support an idea that challenges the position that he holds? Like, this is why so many things don't happen. This is why solar energy doesn't happen, why high-speed rail doesn't happen, right? Is because capitalists own, like, fossil fuel, and they own these old technologies and these old ways of doing things. They're not interested in spending a bunch of money to do R&D on a project because they don't care about the advancement of the society or the development of the culture or any of that kind of stuff. They literally only care about their own bank account and nothing else. Like, they're psychos. And just the sooner you understand this point, the sooner you're going to understand the society you live in. That the people who govern you are psychotic. And like, rapaciously so. Yeah, inverted mystic. Yeah, high-speed rail is good, but that would make cars obsolete, right? So you've got big, giant car manufacturers that would be against it. It is the eMeat S800. Okay, cool. Cool. Thank you, Wix. I love you too, bud. Thank you so much. JT with a heart. Good to see you, JT. Nilo, comrades matter. You're right, bud. Hull, good to see you. Hull writes, I binge watched a lot of your streams. I learned a lot. I'm glad to hear that, friend. I'm glad to hear that. It's always a pleasure. Joe says, absolutely catharsis. Yeah, catharsis. A little sanity, a little light. I'm glad to hear it, guys. Scrail, good to see you, Scrail. Hope you're doing well out there. I just had to tune in to see what John says about Trudeau stepping down. I mean, it's the end of the Liberal Party. I don't know what their move is. Right? Too little, too late. The Pierre Poilievre is going to win a major majority. They're going to be able to enact whatever they want. And they're going to do exactly what conservatives do, which is they're going to take a big textbook this size, plop it on the table, pass it as an omnibus, and say this is the new law of the land. And it's basically going to obliterate the Trudeau administration. Like, it will be as though the Trudeau administration never really happened. In all but one aspect, which is that you're still going to have a weed shop on your corner. Yeah, the U.S. is mostly a service economy now, but who are they going to serve? Right? Like, Jeff Bezos does not need 5,000 tacos a day. Right? Like really what's going to happen to the service economy is you're going to have, like, really, really small stores, like literally a guy with a shelf, right? Just like an ice cream cart, selling like a whole bunch of something that's cheap, easy to mass produce, and that'll be distributed into the society that has, like, no money left, and that guy will be eking out a living doing that, right? And he'll literally be making the stuff in his own kitchen, that kind of thing. And you'll have people doing that. And then it'll flip over to the other side, and you'll have, like, a storefront that'll be, like, right in the path of where Jeff Bezos goes, that has, like, one booth, and it'll sell like a little piece of sirloin steak that has like gold flecks infused on it that they'll put on a big giant plate and sell for $10,000. Right? And those will be the two things that exist in the service economy. Just literally like a guy carting around, like passing out dumplings, and this ostentatious, grotesque, total bullshit. That's what I expect to see. Long Defiant writes, it's true, as an older male, I receive a lot of deference. Yeah, people don't treat women my age that way. It's absolutely true. I see a lot of women in the service industry leave when they get to be my age. Like, when you get to be my age in service, there's this kind of like jovialness, right? There's this sort of like air of respectability. People sort of give you this sense that, oh, you're here and you're respectable. Whereas women my age are definitely seen as like definitely people view men my age as a failure in this society, in this fascist society that we live in. But women my age, oh man, there's no recovering. Right? There's absolutely no recovering. You're at the very bottom, for sure. Which is total bullshit. Like, it's absolute nonsense. Like, I rather like talking to people and offering a service and like being part of that community and like trying to connect and make people feel like there's actually life going on around them, right? Something really lovely going on. And the idea that people have that I would be a failure for pursuing that is like, what a loser society. It's just pearls before swine. That's what it is. It's just total pearls before swine. That you can offer people a really lovely experience and a really lovely time and make them feel good about themselves and give them healthy food that doesn't have poison in it, that you've really vetted, that the chefs have that we actually make in-house and like create this really beautiful atmosphere for people, and they'll totally like enjoy it and laugh and laugh at your jokes and have a great time. But if you were to meet them in the streets, they would basically call you a loser. Like, that's the nature of the society that we live in. And it's I mean, to me, it's just like, if you want to see why our society, like, if you want to see why our society is in the state that it's in, it's this disrespect for service, right? It's this disrespect for the people who are feeding you. It's this disrespect for the people who are trying to build the culture of your society. Because that's fundamentally what it is. It's just the culture of your society that's being built. And there's huge sections of the society that are literally gorging themselves on the produce and living in the environment that is being produced by that service industry while denigrating the people who are actually providing it. So it's just pearls before swine is what it is. There's a reason why our society is in decline. It's because we have no respect for one another. Jahodi writes, too real. People would listen to me far more easily than my women coworkers. Absolutely infuriating. Yeah, happens all the time. For me, there was like this big turning point of recognition. It was a real, like, I swung more dramatically to the left on that realization than maybe ever before. That, as regular listeners know of me, I used to be like a hard right conservative fundamentalist Christian. That was my starting location. That's where I began my life's journey. And of course, it's been sort of a steady, it wasn't from that to that, right? It didn't go like that. It's been this sort of steady, slow, like this. But I definitely can tell you that, like, it went like boom, pretty fast. The moment I had that realization of like, oh yeah, women and immigrants and minorities, like not even immigrants, just like people who are born in Canada who have black skin or Asian skin, or of that descent are treated differently than me. And I observed it. I see it. And that recognition was just like, oh fuck. Like huge change in my perception of the world around me. Because you want to believe that that's not the truth. You know, you want to believe that, like, no, like, I mean, I treat everyone around me, you know, what I consider to be equally. Like, I'm not condescending to women. I'm not condescending to minority groups. Like, I'm trying to have like I'm trying to be colorblind, right? That sort of white male defense. But it's just not true. Like, it's just not true. That and you just work in service for a year, work in service for a month, and you'll see it. It's impossible to miss. You have to actively be missing it on purpose, or just be clueless. Nilo says it can be a double-edged sword. You also get stereotyped for being a straight white male. Not really in service though. You know what the stereotype is for a straight white male in service? Competency. That's the stereotype, right? That they assume you're there because you've chosen to be there. You've made decisions to be there. That when you actually tell them the story of your life and you're like, yeah, no, like my life was destroyed because of COVID, and I got laid off from my job. Like literally everything was taken from me. I was stripped down to the bones, and I took this job because it was available, right? And I'm here. And if you tell them that, suddenly now you're down, right? And I've seen it happen several times. People will walk up to me and literally say, hey, you're the owner of this place, right? They'll say that to me. Oh, you own this place, right? Because of the way I carry myself, the way I talk, the confidence I have, my belief in myself and the universe, right? That I'm a strong, stable, capable, seeming person. And so people come up to me and they say, oh, you're the owner, right? They don't say that to my Iranian compatriot. They don't say that to the Indian guy that's my manager. Right? They don't say that to the guy making the drink. Right? Like, they're not saying that to other people. They're saying it to me. Why? Yep. And Hull writes, but they like going to their immigrant countries for holidays or retirement. Yep. Vietnam, one of the big places people go. Joe, working in retail today is like working at the UN. Yeah, you really like, and one of the things that I find, like, you'll get into conversations with people and people want to have conversations with you, and seemingly reasonable people will suddenly become insane. Like, really insane. And you just kind of have to find a way in yourself to just accept what they're saying. And if you choose to have the conversation with them, you really have to be a diplomat. You really have to talk to them in a way that's like, oh yeah, you're a serious person with serious ideas, you fucking lunatic. And you just can't do anything else, because it's just going to cause a lot of problems for you. Nilo says, the strangest thing about all this is that I first heard about annexing Canada from Haz and Infrared. Yeah, I mean, the American Communist Party is actually picking up steam. I feel like you're going to hear more from those guys, right? For good or for ill. I have questions, I have critiques, I have concerns, but no, I think that those guys are actually gaining influence. And I don't know that it's going to be a positive thing. Jib Jabby, good to see you. Thank you. Joe writes, it was a post from X or Reddit, I think. You might get to put it up. That you put up. Oh, you're talking about... I can't find it. You're talking about this. They can innovate how to make it worse. That's about it. Yeah. Yeah, some of them clearly sadistic for sure. Hull says, heard of Zuckerberg with his free speech policy, another open fascist on the rise. Great. Yeah, he's kowtowing to MAGA. Right? Like they're either like Nazis like Musk is, or they're just cowards. Right? Like Zuckerberg doesn't have a spine. He's not like an actual, like, he doesn't give a fuck about anything. Yeah. Long Defiant. Capitalism only responds to the profit motive, not human need or human suffering. Yeah. JT says, more and more I think my joke about us becoming Morlocks while the rich become Eloi gets more real. Like, there's a Bible story that I think about a lot, which is the Tower of Babel. For those of you who might not know, the Tower of Babel is a very simple story, right? It's that humanity got captured with the idea that it could build a tower so tall that it would reach the heavens. And so God came down and muddled their languages, made it so they all spoke different languages, and so they couldn't communicate with one another. And so the whole project comes apart because of that. And that's basically the long and short of the story. And I like taking a look at these Bible stories and trying to put a secular spin on them and understanding them from the secular perspective, that no, God didn't come down and change everybody's languages, but that rather what happens is that when you build these big giant mega projects, and when you build these kinds of hierarchical structures, and when you have these kinds of large, complex, bureaucratic systems, sections of the society will begin speaking in such a way so that it is indecipherable to other sections of the society. Like, and you kind of see this. Like, the crypto bros do not make any fucking sense to most of us, right? The tech bros do not make any sense at all to a lot of us. Like, there are new languages that have come out that are indecipherable to huge sections of the populace, and so they can't communicate with one another anymore. And there's new technologies that have come out, and those technologies have become like the backbone of huge infrastructural projects. But you have boomers being like, the internet is a series of tubes kind of thinking. And so this is just like, they just can't talk to one another anymore. Right? And so you do have like, and to me, that's a huge indication of the decline of the West, that you want to have cohesiveness. You want to have everybody on the same page, able to communicate with one another with cohesion, and it's just not happening. It's just falling apart, right? And there's no first principle anymore. There's nobody, like, nobody can agree on anything. Just really basic shit, and shit that is like fundamental to the necessity of building a civilization. Like, everyone should have access to food and shelter. Huge sections of the populace say that they shouldn't. And it's just like, okay, cool, that's the end of your civilization. Like, imagine loading up like a game of Civilization, and in your game, every single time you built anything to like provide housing or provide any kind of growth for your population, half the society just didn't get it. Just cuz they didn't earn it. Okay, well, that's the end of your game. You're done. And that's basically where we're at. Because we've wedged these worthless capitalists into the middle of every single thing. They are pathetic dimwits who do not give a fuck about anything other than their own bank account. And so you have homelessness on the rise. You have food bank usage on the rise. You have more and more people being disassociated from the system. And if you keep dumping more and more people off the side of your system, eventually people will find a new system and create a new alternative way of living in the world, because your system has just dumped them overboard. And eventually those people will turn and look at you, and you'll be like, bling, bloop, bleep, bloop, blop, bleep, bloop, bling, bling, bloop, bloop, as far as they're concerned. So they're just going to be like, fuck that. Jesus Christ. I'm going back to the woods. Things make goddamn sense. Oddity writes, I've never heard of women being judged for working a minimum wage service job the way men are. I think in like the larger meta sense, men are looked down on more than women are, like in a sort of larger abstract way. But in the tangible and in the real and in the like day-to-day operations, I think men get more respect than women for sure. Like I think that if you step into like the mating culture, right, the dating culture, like a man that works a service job is just not going to do well in the dating field, whereas a woman who works a service job will do better. But that's just one aspect of society. That's just one aspect of it. And I think that there's some truth to that. Like, I don't want to disparage that idea, but I just have seen too much. Like, I've experienced it too often. Like, men get way more deference in service work than women do, for sure, 100%, 100%. Like, especially if it's like another man, right? Like there's one thing that I do at work, and I've had this conversation with tons of female coworkers. Like, people come in, I'm standing at the till, they'll say, "Hey, how you doing?" Right? Which is just them being polite. And instead of me being like, "Good, what can I get for you?" just to move things along, I say, "Better now that you're here." Right? It's a bit cheeky. It's a bit fun, but 95% of the time they laugh. And then we have like a human interaction, and it's much nicer. And they like it more because they don't like this process, this fucking mechanized bullshit. The last thing anybody wants to see when they walk in the door of this place is some guy standing there going, "What can I get for you? Do you... Like, that's not what people want, right? People want to have a nice time. They want to have a good experience. They want to laugh, right? And so I try to do that. And I've had tons of conversations with female coworkers where they've said to me, "Yeah, I can't say that." And like for a second I was like, "You probably could," but then I realized, no, you couldn't. Right? If a woman said, "Better now that you're here," nope. that's just going to open up a whole can of worms, dude. That's going to be a big problem for her, for sure. Hull says, looking into Western society, being a Machiavellian is a win and being pushed. In media, being a sociopath is depicted as cool, especially by Gen Z. Long as he's got the looks and money. I don't know especially about Gen Z. I tend to agree with you. Like you could take a look at shows like Dexter is a good example. Like Dexter is one. Benedict Cumberbatch is Sherlock. Even Sheldon, like young Sheldon, and like The Big Bang Theory, like the fact that he's like a high functioning sociopath, we're all just like giggling about it, and like tee hee hee, oh Sheldon, right? When it's like kind of scary, right? Really, when you stop and look at him. What's another good one? But like, yeah, they keep presenting. I've said this previously. Like, they keep presenting psychopaths and sociopaths to us as being like lovable and cute, and as like something as an oddity for us to be like, oh wow, tee hee hee, right? And like as a sex symbol, right? As something for us to tolerate. Yeah, Dexter's a good sociopath. He only kills the bad guys. Cool. Dave says, some people would say to you, have you tried Tinder? What a laugh that is, dude. Even the apps are beginning to change their policies because they see that what they're doing is harmful. Like, what was one I saw recently? Hinge just recently changed it so that you could only have 8 mutual likes. So how it works is like you like someone and they like you, and then you match, right? And then uh, uh, and so now what it is that you have to actually unmatch people now. If you want more matches, then you've got to actually unmatch people. And of course, there's a segment of the user base that's complaining about this, because what they like about these dating apps is not that they get to go on dates, but that they get to look at a big list of people being like, oh, all these boys like me. Fuck you. Like, the dating apps themselves are starting to realize, like, oh yeah, there's like some narcissistic, like shitty people in the system. And our system is not designed to vet any of that. Right? And so there's a lot of abusive action and activity that happens through this process, because the whole thing is alienated and disassociated. You can literally ghost people and you never see them again. Right? You don't actually have to live with the consequences of how you treat people. Right? You don't actually have a community. There's no community center, there's no church, there's no any of that. Right? Like you just, you can literally just shit all over somebody and flip them the bird and then never see them again. So to me, and like I actually think the worst part about the dating apps is that it like a man will just have sex with whoever, right? And when you live in like a promiscuous open society like we do, like a man will just be like, yep, I'll hit you, 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 blah 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 blah. Just go blah 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 blah. And women will have this sense of like, oh well, I pulled that guy, and so I can always pull that guy, and I'll always, like, my prince is right around the corner. There's like this Disney brain rot thinking of this prince is right around the corner. And they don't understand that they're basically just being fucked and left. Like, they're basically just being like bump bump bump, just dumped essentially. And like they think they reeled in a 10 because they're a 10, but just like dudes will fuck whatever, right? And so it's created this like real distortion of perception in the society, and it's created this real like it's created this real distortion in the dating market for sure, where there's a lot of unrealistic expectations and a lot of, I really don't want to use the word delusional, like that's not correct, but like people don't really understand what the structure of their society actually looks like. Right? People don't really understand that like the vast majority of people are like making like $30,000 to $40,000. And that's really what like the majority, like the overwhelming majority is actually at. And there's just huge sections of the population that don't seem to understand that that's the truth. That seem to think that like either you get people who are not making as much and so they're expecting that you make more, right? Or they are making more, and so they're expecting that you make as much as they do or more. And it's just like, that's not real. So there's this not understanding what's going on in their own environment, and not understanding that like most people are struggling. And I feel like there's going to be like a dramatic resetting of expectation that's going to happen, especially as people get older, right? There's just going to be this dramatic resetting of expectation. And I do think that a lot of what has happened is this rise of social media and this rise of dating apps that kind of allows for this like casual, like this casual sex encounter but in a much bigger way. Like the dating pool with apps is huge now. It's massive, right? And so the expectation is blown so far out of proportion. Like, it really did used to be that your dating pool was basically your neighborhood, right? Your workplace, wherever community center you went to, like whatever communal kind of thing you were engaging in, that's more or less your dating pool. Go down to your local bar, right? Your local pub, that's more or less your dating pool. And so this builds a sense of reality, right? You see these people and you're like, okay, this is the lived reality that I live in, and this is the expectation that I have, right? This is what's going on. But with dating apps, the dating pool is the entire city that you live in. So instead of your dating pool being like 10,000 people, let's say, right? Your dating pool is now 6 million people, 20 million people. Like, this means that you can set an expectation that is just like so far beyond the norm of what reality is actually offering. And I do think that huge sections of the population are lost in the sauce. They're just lost in the sauce. And they're just lost in the digital world. That they're not actually coming into reality, and they're not actually planting their feet on the ground, and they're not actually looking around themselves and saying, like, okay, what's actually going on in my society actually? But I do think that there are events that are going to begin happening that are going to be decisive. Like, right now there's sort of this, like, COVID happened and everyone's like, oh, okay, so, oh, well, you're in this position. Oh, well, but, you know, I'm waiting for my prince. Well, when you go to your job and you look and you see like 10,000 people homeless, it's going to reset your expectation for what your society is actually delivering. And I'm pretty much, well, I just, Inverted Mystic says social media is a great thing because we have people like you, but, well, that's kind of you to say. But at the same time, it's also the worst thing that's ever happened to dating. Well, I also have big complaints about the dating apps because I think that they're not designed to, like all things that capitalists create, they're poisoned, right? Like, why would a dating app ever want anybody to stop using the dating app? Which is the logical conclusion to using a dating app, right? Like, the logical conclusion of a dating app is that you use it, you find the person that you like and that you love, right? You go and you have a relationship together, right? So 2 people stop using your product. And so the whole thing is designed to keep people using it, right? So that means that you should absolutely never try to get people to connect with one another and stay together in the long term. You should always want people to be constantly searching and never actually finding, right? Isn't that sort of the idea of swiping, though? Oh, yeah, and then there's this just, like, ultra vapid... Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a meat market, basically. Like, you don't actually even get to talk to people. You don't actually even get to know a person. You don't actually even get to hear anything that they think or what they do or any of that. It's literally just a picture, and you go, yeah, put me on that. And so what do you think happens? Right? A small group of hunky men attract a large group of women, and those large group of women expect that they're going to end up with a hunky man. And guess what? They won't. Like, they won't. It's just the truth. Like, there's not that many of those men. And there never will be. Especially not when you have an environment that poisons the food, impoverishes the citizenry, makes it impossible for anybody to actually achieve anything, right? So this small group of hunky men who have a trust fund and have the blue eyes and are over 6 feet tall, right? They're not going to go for most of the population. And incidentally, even if they did, there's not that many of them. Right? There just isn't that many of them. But because a woman can swipe right on them and match with them and get a couple of dates and have sex with them, thanks to these apps, right? They think this is the type of person that I'm going to end up in a relationship with, and it's just not going to happen, sweetie. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, you had a nice time with that guy. That happened, right? That guy wanted to have sex with you. That's what the narrative is. Like, I just think the entire dating market and the entire dating pool is just totally fucked, and the entire society is fucked. Like, I think it's indicative of the society that we live in. Like, the whole thing is just gone completely off the rails, but everybody's acting like it hasn't. And like, I think that the men that are taking advantage of the system are taking advantage of the system for sure. Anyway, I got to scroll down because I'm sure you guys are commenting on this. Nilo writes, as a food worker, they don't want us to become more skilled. That would make us more valuable, so they want us to be useless workers, baristas instead of chefs. Yeah, I mean, they want us to be replaceable, and they want us to be connected to the system. They want us to rely on the system. Am I blurry to you guys? Or is that just over here? No, it's just over here. Okay. Joe writes, it's pretty 50-50. Half the people are gracious and respectful. The other half are stupid and rude. I try to focus on the good half. Yeah, here's the line that I use, Joe. Whenever I encounter like the stupid and rude people, which is few and far between now because I'm so goddamn good at my job. But I like to say, I was just a visitor in that person's life. Their punishment is that they have to continue living that way. And that really helps, I think, stop, because people will carry it through into the rest of their day, right? So somebody treats them badly, someone treats them rudely, and they'll carry that into their day, and then they'll also inflict it upon other people. You'll see that as well. But when it happens to me, as that person is walking away, and I'm watching them walking away, I just think to myself, I was just a visitor in that person's life. Their punishment is that they have to continue living that way. And then I take a breath and I just move on with my life. That's it. Right? Long Defiant says, I volunteer at Pittsburgh stadiums, serving food, etc. A lot of times the women I work with will turn to me and take care of a people problem they couldn't work out themselves. Yeah. No, I see that happen all the time. It's a little bit better in the place that I work now because the environment itself is so relaxing. Like, I've worked in like high pressure, like serving a lot of bankers kind of situations. Right now I'm working in like literally a park. So it's just great. Everybody's on vacation. Right? So you're always just talking to people who are just like, hey, how are you? Oh, good. If they're stressed, it's just because they have a kid. Right? And so it's like kid stress, which is different. But nobody's like, I got somewhere to be. You gotta, like, no. I am the place they're meant to be. They don't have another place to go. They're at the park. Right? There's literally a pond over there. Like, go check it out. and that's really nice. But you would end up in like these high pressure volume situations, and it's especially bad like imagine just like one of these psychotic bankers dealing with like a new immigrant who with English as a second language. It's not difficult to see what happens there, and it does happen. So what ends up happening? I step in. Oddies, I know they're subject to misogyny and all that. Oh, yeah. Neela says, also speaking as a food worker, not enough service people believe in the value of organizing the workplace. Oh, yeah, tell me about it, dude. I've tried. I've tried to organize my workplace. They're not in it. They're not for it. And I think part of the reason is that, like, the establishment that I work at is a little bit ahead. Like, we are paid a higher wage. We have a revenue sharing model. Like, we have certain things. The ownership, it's not a corporate environment. Like, it's just like a single private owner. And so that single private owner is much more loosey-goosey about a lot of things. The fact that there isn't a corporate environment, I think, is a big plus for everybody. Because the second you get corporate environment and corporate bureaucracy and HR and all that shit involved, it's just death. It's just absolute death. Like, I can't stomach walking into a Starbucks anymore because you can just feel how shitty it is. Like, it's just all corporate and soulless and just like, bleh. And so trying to get my workplace organized is just not going to happen. Nilo says, exactly, Joe. It's scary. It's a lot of work. No one thinks they're going to be around long enough for it to be worth it. Yeah, there's also that, right? Like, I think a lot of people don't want to believe that they're just going to end up here. They're going to end up in these jobs, right? That they're every service worker has something else they're doing, right? Because service work is not seen as it's not respected as an end spot. Nobody respects the person that's in service, right? Even though huge segments of the society are in service. Like, even service workers don't respect other service workers, which is just bananas. But we live in a highly fascist society, so it's hardly surprising. But, like, with the collapses that are coming, with the declines that are coming, and, like, some of them will be sharp. Like, some of them will be sharp. I think that there's going to be a recalibration, a rethinking of these positions. Like, I fully expect to see, like, we were just talking about the dating market, right? Like, I fully expect to see, like, people who are 30 and 40 talking to one another, being like, oh, I met this boy, or oh, I met this woman, right? And one of the things will be, it won't be, well, what do they do for work, right? It will be, do they have a job? And if the answer is, yes, they do have a job, then that'll be enough. That's what I expect to see. Henry Trudeau, good to see you, bud. Canada can't do anything at all. What are they going to do? You sanction me. I export maple syrup. I don't export maple syrup anymore. I mean, I think that Canada's long-term goal should be to control its own production. Like, Canada doesn't really have control of its own production right now. We mainly produce raw resources and then ship those raw resources elsewhere to be produced, to be manufactured. And yes, I tend to agree with you, Henry. That Canada is already that subjected to the big, strong, very powerful big guy America. Yeah. Like, we are a vassal, for sure. Like, there's no denying it. That, like, the economic and military power of the United States for sure can overwhelm Canada. For sure it can. Like, there's no reason to pretend like that's not true. And that's what's got Canada so spooked. That's what's got us all very spooked. Because we're not interested in connecting ourselves to America legally. Right? We don't want especially this president and this Congress and this Senate and this Supreme Court to have power in our country. We're very disinterested in that. We're not interested in giving up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We're not interested in giving up our court system, right? We're not interested in that. There are things going on here in Canada that I think most Canadians would like to maintain and keep uh, uh, like our adherence to the human rights code, yeah, at least domestically. Like when we look down into the United States and see some of the things that have happened, I think Canadians get very concerned. Like, I'll just give you one right off the top of my head: the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Like the fact that that kid walked. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Nothing indicated to the rest of the world more that the United States is just this barbarian country more than a kid who outright said on camera, I'm going to go over there and I hope I get to shoot some people with this gun I'm bringing over a state line. And then he did. Like, what are you talking about? It's just like cold-blooded murder. And the kid's like walking around and is like an icon of the right. So no thanks. Like, if that's your outcomes, no thanks. Big hard stop no. Like, we don't want our food supply to be poisoned. We don't want your dim-witted culture. Like, we're not interested, America. You can keep that down there. That's nice. Like, it's bad enough that you're our neighbors. Right? We don't want you to own our house. Long Defiant writes, if Canada becomes part of the U.S., the only point will be the resource extraction. Yeah, you'll just become the latest internal colony. I mean, to me, the big loss would be our legal sovereignty. That, like, so I'll give you a real clear example of what I'm talking about. Like the abortion issue that exists in the United States, that issue has been resolved in Canada so thoroughly that there literally is not a movement to overturn abortion. Like there's a group within the Conservative Party that talks about it, but the Conservatives are like, yeah, we're not taking that fight. There's absolutely no way that we could take that fight and win that fight. Like hard right arch conservative judges are like, abortion is a woman's right to choose. Conversation's over. Like the Supreme Court of Canada is like, it's between the woman and a doctor. Conversation's over. Like, they do not hear those cases. They do not take that seriously at all. 0%. Because of the way the Canadian court system works. Right? And, like, absolutely no way, full stop, would I be willing to give up. Like, the way the Canadian court system works compared to the way the United States court system works, like, get the fuck right out of here. Like, the way the American court system works is bonkers. It's actually crazy how it actually works. You literally win an election, because everything's an election in America. So just some yokel hick who's like the son of an oil baron can run a campaign to be a judge. And now Wayne Galen, the third junior, is now the judge of Texas County. Like, shut up. It's so embarrassing. Like, it's just an embarrassing way to run a legal system. And, like, Canada's not perfect. Like, we're not, like, we don't have it, like it all figured out. But boy, howdy, would that be a huge, massive, gigantic step down to introduce American-style judicial policy into Canada? Fuck that. Absolutely firm no. Hard no. No, thank you. Like, we believe in things called rights. We uphold those rights. Like, and could we be doing more? Could we be doing better? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But you know what would be an absolute decline of the rights of citizens in Canada? Joining America. For sure. Like, for sure. Henry writes, Canada will become a neoliberal growing state. I mean, we're already like a neoliberal vassal state. Like, again, it's bad enough that we have this guy as a neighbor. Like, and there's very little that we can really do about it, right? Because America is a very overwhelming force. But there are definitely things that, like, we should be very protectionist when it comes to the United States. Like, The United States has been taken over. Like, there's a huge Christian fascist influence in the United States, right? And they're taking over the Supreme Court is basically dead in the United States. It's just like a billionaire playground. You know, like if the Supreme Court of Canada and if the court system wants to protect itself from that, then joining America is the first, step of its decline. No, thank you. JT writes, it's just more normalized for women, and movies are written where the role is male, demasculated, has to work service job. Yeah. Men might get superficially joked at, but not put into situations women are en masse. Yeah, I mean, I could tell you personally from like my dating experience, like a guy working in service like does not. It's basically like a no, like right away. Like it's straight up just a no. And like you don't really get to know me, you don't know anything about me. All you know is that like I'm working this service job, and so it's a no. I'm not like the 6 foot blue eyes trust fund, like working in finance. Like 500 men are. Oh yeah, Hall, American Psycho. The movie is very glorified. Yeah, Garden State. Good to see you. Dave says, I hope you know it was sarcasm on Twitter. How dare you, sir? JT, I feel so bad for the alienation the youngest and upcoming generations are going to go through. Oh, yeah. From age 5, put on the social media competition mindset. I think there's going to be this huge rejection of social media generally. Like, I think there's going to be a backlash to it. And people are going to really walk away from it. Because I think people are going to see more and more that, like, it's not really helping us. It's keeping us in our bubbles. It's keeping us alienated. I think about this all the time when it comes to like this work that I'm currently doing. I'm I'm glad that I reduced it to a single day a week because I think that facilitates something useful, which is everybody coming together and having this catharsis and having this moment of like, okay, we are all in this together, but it is useless for organizing. It is absolutely useless. It was useless before the corporations started mass censorship campaigns, and now that they are on this mass censorship train, it's next to useless. That the only way to actually organize is to get involved in your local organization and get involved with people who want to organize locally. It's the only way to do it. And I think that social media acts as a dead end and wastes a lot of people's time because they think that this is organizing, and this is not organizing, right? Like, I think that this is valuable. I think it's valuable for me and my mental health. Lots of you tell me that it's valuable for your mental health, that it's a good catharsis. It's a good way for us to come together and feel like we're not so alienated and alone. But this is not organizing. And I think people mistake it for organizing. And I think that in many ways it's used that way on purpose. That it's sent into the society specifically to be disruptive in this way. Like if you can get like a leftist just grinding their life into Reddit and grinding everything into the internet, cool. They're useless. They don't know anybody. They don't know what to do. They have no idea how to organize. They have no skills. They're not connected. Right? What scares the shit out of people is 100 people in a room. That's scary. Like, that's a real threat. Right? 100 people on the internet? Who gives a fuck? 10,000 people on the internet? Who gives a fuck? 10,000 people on the street? Problem. That's a threat. So I think that there is going to be like a mass rejection that comes out of the younger generation, and it will be like a generational divide, right? Like it'll be like the young kids will look at it and be like, that's for the olds, right? That's that, and they'll and we'll talk about it. It's like what are we gonna call it? We'll call it like neo Amish or something. We'll give it some stupid name, right? And call it like we did with like the hipsters or whatever. And it'll just be a whole group of people that are literally just like analog. They'll just be like, yep, social media, the internet, all that, forget it. That's for old people, or that's for losers. You don't want to be a loser. Like put the phone down. Like, and it'll be that way. Oddity writes, can the dramatic resetting of expectations happen now, please? Yeah, I mean, I think 2025 is going to be a big year for a lot of people. Like 2025 is going to have a lot of weird fucking moments. Like, and the moments are just going to get weirder and stranger, and things are going to get more like just odd, right? Just odd. Garden State writes, now it's frowned upon to date people in your town, at least in America. I married my wife who I met in middle school. I've been with over a decade now. I'm an exception to the norm today. Yeah, it does seem to be the case, doesn't it? Henry writes, that's true, John, but you gotta understand the dating markets. If everybody demands high dating standards, nobody will date. Yeah. So people tend to ease up the harder it gets. But that's not really what's happening. What's actually happening in the dating market is that more and more people are disassociating from it, right? People aren't trying anymore. Um, like we're seeing statistics coming out saying that like as much as I think it's literally half of the female population is going to be single by the time they're 50. Like we're actually looking at like a major crisis, right? Like it is actually a major crisis. But that's basically what America is now, and just what the West is now. It's just one big, gigantic, major crisis. And uh, like, really think about what that's going to do to a society where like half of your female population is going to be single, and huge sections of the male population is going to be single, and nobody is able to communicate with one another, and nobody's able to actually get on with one another, and nobody's able to build like one of the most basic foundational relationships of a society, right? Like nobody's going to be having sex in a meaningful way. Like nobody's going to have like sexual relationships, and no one's going to be trying to build these relationships. Like you're looking at a society that is literally on the fundamental levels of who we are tearing itself apart. Like your whole thing is fucked. And as it goes by generation by generation by generation, you're gonna have less kids. You're gonna have a population decline. You're gonna have a rise of misogyny, right? You're gonna have a rise of people who really hate one another. Like it's really really bad. Like it's really really bad. What's happening? Dave writes, that's the reason why most women complaining about not being able to find a man, because she's expecting the man to make more than her because she got a bachelor in accounting. Yeah, like to me that's straight up patriarchal thinking, right? Like it's straight up just like I'm being valued exclusively for the measurement of the patriarchy and of capital, right? Like I'm not measured based on my kindness. I'm not measured based on what I feel or think. I'm not measured based on who I am, right? It's literally just how much money are you making? Like straight up, you might as well just in a lot of cases, you might as well just show how much money you're making. Not even have a picture. Just be like, I make $100,000 a year. Probably get a ton of swipes if you did that, right? Because I think that our society is primarily fascist, and like a fascist society is killing itself pretty straightforwardly. Hull writes, oh yeah, loneliness amongst male and females has gone up. I dare to say that Gen Z will experience the most self something in their 50s and 60s. Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm not even trying to be dramatic. Yeah, I mean, I do think there'll be a breaking point, right? Like I say, I think that we are a society that's constipated. I think that we're a constipated society where like we know that things need to change and we know that they need to move, but we're just kind of held in this constipated moment. And like there are movements that have happened in the past, like the hippie movement happened, right? Like there are just eventually moments where people finally just go, "Wait, what have I been thinking about? Like what is this idea that I've been holding in my head?" Like, no, that's stupid. It's obviously not working. Like what are we doing here? And people will diverge. Like the Occupy movement happened, right? Like there's just I think that it's actually pretty unlikely that it will actually go that way, where it'll just be women go this way, men go this way, and we'll have our little camps and we'll look at each other and be like, boo. I just don't actually think it happens that way. And I think the more likely thing that starts to happen is people start to break with capital and people start to break with these ideas and these systems because they're unsustainable and they don't make any goddamn sense, right? Joe writes, then by the time they're in their mid 30s, early 40s, they've been run through too much for any decent man to want to be with them. I don't know that I buy too much into that idea. Like, like, I do think there's going to be, like, I say the phrase truth and reconciliation a lot, right? And a lot of, like, forgiveness, right? Like, this is a very confusing place to be. And it's made extra confusing because the leadership of our country wants it to be confusing. Like, the system is chaotic, and it's chaotic on purpose. And it's difficult to fault a young lady for pursuing or following sex and like pleasure or hedonism or whatever name you want to give it. And same for a young man. Like it's difficult to hold it against them, really. Uh, uh, I tend to I'm 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 pretty like I think gone is the day of the expectation that you're going to have like a young virginal woman. Like I just think that that's gone. And that's not a real thing that's going to happen. So I feel like we're just holding on to expectations that are not real. Like we're like eventually reality asserts itself. Like eventually reality does exist and you just have to say okay, reality exists. But we're so disassociated from our reality and we're living in these fake environments, these digital environments, these digital hallucinations, right? And we want to believe that the digital hallucination is going to manifest and it's something positive for us, and it just won't. It just won't. And that at the end of the day, you're going to really have to ask yourself a hard question. And that question is going to be, do you want to have a relationship with somebody who is also going through the trauma of this existence and this reality? Or do you want to be alone? And you're going to have to make the decision for yourself. And you're going to have to decide what's more valuable to you. Because every relationship that you have with anybody, man, woman, doesn't matter, all spectrums, whatever you want to say, like that person is going to be a traumatized person, and they're going to be traumatized by the definition of coming out of a capitalist Western society. The environment is traumatizing. They have been poisoned. There is plastic in their system. They have been bombarded and inundated by Western propaganda. They have some of them have worldviews that are actually insane. Like I recently saw a video where a guy was on the streets and he was asking people, hey, do you think we should invade North Korea? And huge segments of the population were saying yes, we should absolutely invade North Korea. And then the guy pulled out a map and said, where's North Korea? And none of them could find North Korea on the map. Some people were pointing at Canada. Like, people were pointing all over the place. None of them knew where North Korea was. And they're saying we should invade that place. Like, that's trauma. Like, you're literally saying, let's enact huge, massive scale violence on a people, and we don't know where they are. That's trauma, baby. And I feel like this narrative of trauma is good for us to understand. That, like, you're never going to find anybody in the dating pool who is untraumatized. Because the system is traumatizing. Like, I guess the best that you could ever hope for is that there's a person who's, like, acknowledging that they've been traumatized. That's probably the best that you could ever hope for. It's just a person saying out loud, yeah, I've experienced this trauma. These are the things that I'm trying to do to deal with that trauma. But they'll never be a perfect person. It'll just never be the case. And I feel like this narrative of just like, oh, there's so much trauma in the system, and our expectations should reflect that. Like, there's just events that are going to happen soon that's going to make people go like, oh, like, yeah, like we gotta take this shit a little bit more seriously. Because I just think that there's a lot of people walking around living in La La Land. Like, they're just living in this La La Land of just like, ah, la 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 la, everything will be fine. I'll be whisked away by a prince. Or I'll find my princess, my virginal queen. It's like, none of that's going to happen, dude. Like, no, that's not real. Like, that's not real at all. Like, best possible case scenario, I think, for most people who have decided to pursue the path of looking for the relationship, best possible case scenario for most of those people is that you're going to find somebody who has just accepted that they live in this traumatized society and that they deal with their own trauma, and that they're willing to accept you with your trauma. And that when you have your traumatic moments together, you'll both understand that while you have to deal with it on that personal level, you also understand that it's a bigger story than just the two of you. And so you won't take it as personally, and you'll be able to move through it because of it. Like, this to me is why people are looking for stability. And why I say it over and over again. People are willing to accept a nation's wrong-headed policies as long as they're stable. Like, people are more willing to be like, well, I disagree with this policy or this idea or maybe even the structure of this government, but they're stable. So I know what to expect. Whereas in America, like, all of that's like, there's no rules. Nobody knows what to do or what to say or what to experience or anything like this. Like, and the expectations are all over the place. And people are like living in fucking La La Land. Inverted Mystic says you won't have to deal with the trauma alone. Sometimes it's easier to deal with the trauma alone. Right? Like, the hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. That's the hardest thing for a person to do. And it's just, sometimes it's easier to do that when you're just alone. Right? Like that's more or less where I am at, right? Like I tried to get back into the dating pool and I tried to experience that kind of stuff and I tried to do some sort of stuff, but I got to tell you, dude, like you know what I really value? You know what I really value? I really value being alone. I really value having my peace. I really value just being in my space, moving at my own pace, not having to answer to anybody. I can go where I want, when I want to do it. I don't need to ask anybody's permission, except my little dog Milo. Except my little dog Milo. Yes, Milo, I know. I know. You're the only one who I need to answer to. Right? And I don't need to explain myself or defend myself or create any kind of position or anything like that. Right? I don't need to have a big debate about something if I want to go do anything. Right? And I certainly don't need to deal with another traumatized person who in a lot of cases is not dealing with their trauma. In a lot of cases. And then turns and looks at me and expects me to deal with their trauma when they refuse to deal with their own trauma. So, no thanks. And like, what do I end up getting out of the deal in the end of it all? And this was a big dawning realization for me. Right? What do I actually get from this person who's treating me like I'm supposed to solve all their problems as they refuse to solve their own problems? What do I actually get? So I'd rather be alone. Like, I'd rather be alone. It's easier. Just way easier. It's and like nothing crystallizes in my mind more that we live in like a deeply fascist country than trying to get into the dating market. Where like li- literally if you are like you're measured almost exclusively by your wealth, right? And then if you and then if it's not your wealth, it's just your power, right? No thanks. Like not interested. I'm looking for people who actually give a shit. Nilo writes, I love promiscuous women, and if one will stay with me forever, all the better. Oh yeah, like don't get me wrong, like I think people should fuck who they want, and like that's fine. I just think that there is I just think that most people are living in total fucking la la land. Like especially at my age, dude. Like over COVID, there was this huge like breakup thing that happened. Huge segment of the population, like they were forced into a position where they had to live with one another and they didn't go to work. And there ended up being a whole bunch of divorces and a whole bunch of people breaking up with one another, right? And I think there's a whole bunch of people that are looking around being like, oh shit, like my guy was actually not bad, right? Because everybody's gotten into this la la land sort of like, no, my prince is right around the corner. I just need to go find him. Like, it's I don't know. It's like a mass utopian delusion where everybody thinks that humanity is something other than what it is, and that the human that you have is somehow not as good as the human that you will maybe might find. And so everybody is comparing the person that they're with to a person who doesn't exist, who only exists in their imagination. Like literally a face at the end of a Disney movie. Like literally. That's what's happening. It's just going to be a big La La Land moment. Come on, dude. Garden State writes, in most of my retail service jobs, a lot of the older people were more on board about organizing than most of the younger folk my age. Yeah, I think that's legitimate. Like, because older people, like, they know what's up. Like, they know that this is their job now. Younger people, like I say, like, younger people think that they're going to go somewhere else. And then 20 years pass and they're basically in the same job because there aren't that many opportunities in the society anymore. JT writes, the Western fascist states were fine with fascist Germany until it breached into their own fascist nations. Sort of the same with the US, yeah. Joe writes, as George Carlin quipped, Germany wanted to take over the world. Bullshit. That's our effing job. Yeah. Loaf, good to see you, Loaf. I gotta be honest, when I see Canadians online frothing at the mouth against individuals accused of crimes, I worry that we are more interested in giving up charter rights than we'd like to admit. People absolutely despise the fact that the presumption of innocence means that accused people shouldn't wait in jail until they get their fair trial. I do think that there is a segment of the population that thinks that way, for sure. Like, you've heard me say several times already, our society is fairly fascist, right? And it's gotten more fascist, which I think the internet and the rise of social media has encouraged. Like, I think that there's a lot of a depleting of empathy, a disassociation with one another on a basic kind of human level. Like, we and when we do have human interaction, it's scripted. There's a lot of scripted interaction that happens. That's what service work is, right? Service work is scripted work. And the people who are the best at service work are the ones who can go off the script while maintaining the spirit of the script, right? Because the spirit of the script is that you are the consumer, you are above me, I am the service worker, I am below you. What can I do for you today? How can I help you? What am I here to do for you? Okay, well, what can maybe we can smooth that out for you. Yeah, sure, I'll help you out with that. That's the spirit of the service work, right? And the script is as boilerplate as it can get. Hey, how you doing today? I'm doing well. What can I do for you today? I'll get this, that, and this. Okay, would you like this, that, and this? No, thanks, or yes, thanks. Okay, cool. How are you paying today? I'm paying this way. Thanks. Here you go. Well, here's your receipt. Have yourself a nice day. Off you go. That's the script, and you do it. As a consumer, you do it. And that's what's called human interaction in our society. So, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? So most of the interactions that you're having in real life are fake. And then on top of that, we've added in this layer of social media interaction that is also extremely fake. There's just an overwhelming falseness to everything. And so what is this doing? It's distilling out of us, and it's stunting our ability to have empathy for one another, right? It's stunting our capacity to actually connect on a just basic empathetic level with one another, because we're not actually having real human interactions anymore. And so what does this open up the society for politically? Fascism. Pretty straightforwardly. That they just need to get a better job. Well, what are they complaining about? That happened so long ago. What does that matter? It didn't even happen to them. It happened to their father. It's just basic fascism, right? JT writes, I hope so, and maybe the previous generations were predisposed to just accept it. Younger generation circumstance might prevent the capture. I try to tell folk the internet is fine for learning, but it also must be transferred to real action at some point. Otherwise, it is useless. Well, the big trouble with what the internet is becoming is it's just going to become so cluttered with garbage that it'll be unusable. That's what's going to happen to the internet. Joe writes, I was a promiscuous young man in my 20s, being a lead singer and guitarist in a LA rock band. Ooh, so I don't want to be a hypocrite. Garden State writes, like Richard Wolff says, Americans do what toddlers do. They cover their eyes and think that the danger in front of them is now gone. It doesn't work that way. And eventually kids grow out of that, but American society has not. Well, there's a lot of memory holing that happens in America. Like, the Occupy movement has basically been memory holed, right? Nobody remembers the Occupy movement. Moreover, nobody thinks the Occupy movement was important. Like, it's just simply not discussed or brought up anymore. It's not a historical event, right? It's just gone into the memory hole. Like, to the point where, like, I've seen people do, like, a timeline of action in American history, and they'll just, Occupy's just not there, right? And so it's again, it's this system of propaganda. Like, there's the things that they do, the reason why they do them is because they work. Like, the reason why they keep thrusting Marvel movies and Top Gun and all of this, like, cop propaganda in front of us and all of this proto-fascist propaganda, right? It's because it works. It achieves the goal that they're setting to achieve, right? Even if that goal is something as mundane as just keep them talking about nothing. Keep them discussing nothing important whatsoever. Certainly don't allow them to grow their empathetic capacity or their critical thinking skills, right? Don't keep them, just keep them in this circular pattern of stupidity. Like, keep them stupefied. And I, like, really hate to break it to anybody out there that's, like, in love with these Marvel movies, but if that's what you consider to be the apex of your culture, then you're stupefied. Like, these are literally vapid and empty, achieving nothing at all. As a tangent, I'm watching a great anime right now called Freerun. It's Freerun Journey's End. I'm only about 4 or 5 episodes in. I think there's 28 episodes. But the storytelling is so beautifully done, and it's so personal. Like, you know, you're watching trashy media that's kind of just empty of purpose, if the goal of the movie is to stop an apocalypse. Like, if the goal of the plot is to stop the end of the world or the end of the galaxy or something like that, chances are good it's worthless. I mean, it's good for a good, like, eat your popcorn, right? Whatever, jerk off. Do it, you live your life, but don't root your morality in it. But if you're watching something and the stakes are very personal and you're learning something about a person as they're going along and finding their way, right? You're going to get a lot more out of that. A lot more out of that. Like, I think about, like, something like Napoleon Dynamite is a really good example of this. Just a movie that came out of nowhere. Everybody was just like, what is this movie? And suddenly it exploded. It became a huge phenomenon. Right? Why? Because you really fell in love with this Napoleon Dynamite kid, and you were really just like, you really felt for this guy. Right? You really related to him, and you really related to his journey, and you were really rooting for him. And there's a reason why our society really struggles to create these small scale, relatable stories that people can connect to and follow along on a journey, because in this environment that we live in, any story that actually achieves that must, by its very definition, be anti-capitalist. Like, what are the day-to-day struggles of the average American? Paying rent, holding down a job. And when they do kind of try to bring that consciousness into the average day-to-day reality. It ends up being something like The Office or Superstore, which sort of uses the workplace as a backdrop, but is wholly disconnected from the experience, like the lived experience of people in those environments in the first place. Right? Nilo says, don't give up, John. Just don't settle. You're good. I don't describe it as giving up. Like, I'm just like, I just realized that I'm happy how I am. And that I don't want to act in a way for like a potential future mate. Like, I don't go to the gym because I'm hoping to attract a future mate. I don't read books and educate myself because I'm hoping to attract a future mate. I'm not pursuing this beekeeping thing in the hopes that I'll attract a future mate. Right? I'm not pursuing other lines or doing anything because I'm hoping to attract a future mate. I'm doing it for myself because I think it'll be good for me, and it'll be good for the environment that I live in to have people who are doing those sorts of things in it. But like the the truth, and really, and I've been very open and truthful about it and very personal on this particular cast, but like I think that people are more or less traumatized and are not actually being serious about that trauma, and kind of think that everything's okay, and it's not. And I like really have come to see that that's the truth. That you have the people who have always said yes sir, who have completely bought into the system of capital, and they have no idea what to make of me. So I just end up being a big walking red flag as far as they're concerned, because they think to themselves, I've always said yes sir, and that's been good enough. Like, why can't this guy just say yes sir like I say yes sir? While their society commits a genocide and tears itself apart and spreads homelessness and poverty wherever it goes, and then it's going to have an economic collapse. And then you have people who have been like betrayed and discarded and thrown out, and are struggling and are coming around and messing about and all this kind of stuff. And those people are traumatized as well in a different way. And like, it's just so what am I getting? Because it doesn't seem like it's even intimacy. Like, I just am like, so I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Should the fates align themselves in such a way that a potential partner floats into my life and is actually like a serious thing, sure. But like, boy howdy, dude. Like, a communist looking for love in a fascist society, good luck. Like, good luck. So I'm not holding my breath. I'm not putting any hope into it at all. Like, I have exactly a 0% expectation. Like, if I turn 95 and I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to be like, oh, I never found the lady to love me. Oh yeah, sure, okay. Near as I can tell, that seems to be perfectly fine. Like, seems to be perfectly fine from my perspective. Oh, I never found somebody to drive a dagger into my stomach. Oh, I never found somebody to be a huge pain in my ass constantly. Ah, damn. I never found somebody who to make me feel bad about my life's choices, or make me feel bad about the way I enjoy my free time. Right? Man, nobody nagged at me because I wasn't participating in a system of capital that's configured itself as a death cult. Dang. Like, I'm good. Peanut Butter Beatrice says, agree 100%. Call it selfish, but you only have one life. Better to be honest with yourself and enjoy whatever happiness you can. Yeah, and I mean, I get to thinking about like who would I want as a partner in my life? Like what type of person would I want to be with? And like I got to tell you, like as much as I rail on the people who are like I'm looking for a man in finance, 6 foot, like that kind of, and how that narrows the potential pool so dramatically. The same thing happens for me, right? I want somebody who reads books, who talks about ideas, who does art, who is kind and empathetic. And in this society, so I'm not holding my breath. Nilo writes, my ex left me during the pandemic. Yeah, same thing happened to me, dude. Yeah, I feel like 2025 is going to be insane. Oh, yeah, dude. 2025 is going to be crazy. How could it not be? Like, not only do you have, like, a huge right wing shift happening in North America with, like, pretty naked fascism happening in the United States, but you also have, like, the entire global system of capital basically coming to an end, right? Like, the system of global capital is coming to an end. So it's just going to be a catastrophe. And the people who are in power are dimwits. Like they're deeply stupid people. Just completely self-serving, utterly narcissistic, not giving a shit about anybody other than themselves. So it's just going to be a catastrophe of epic proportions. JT writes, I think the managerial class is going to get replaced with more AI. Service and manufacturing still get done by the citizens. Gives enough layer of distance between the workers and the capitalists. Yeah, it's always about layers of distance. Peanut Butter Beatrice says, I've noticed lately I've been getting more cynical, apathetic, and numb. It's rather disconcerting and one of the reasons I need this space. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm getting cynical, apathetic, and numb, but I do think that there is like just a simple truth of saying like at some point you got to kill that hope. Like at some point we are going to have to say like yeah, like it's just not going to happen. Right? Like we are going down the path. Like we're doing it. It's not going to not happen. And there does come a point where holding on to the hope becomes kind of delusional. It becomes a form of denialism. Like eventually, and it's not, I don't think it's cynical or apathetic or numb to say and to accept that these these realities are coming. Like it's happening. Right? Like Donald Trump is the president. The House and the Senate are held by Republicans. The Supreme Court is bought by corporate power. That what we are looking at is a fascist government. Right? Like, I don't think that that's a cynical thing to say. I think that's just an observation of reality and an acknowledgement that, yep, reality exists. Here it is. And it's going to continue existing in that way. And so the question is just, what do you do about it for yourself? Like, what do you do about it for yourself? Because I don't know that I can cry any more tears about it. You know? I don't think I have any grief left in me for the state of our nation or the state of our communities. My grief is reserved for more personal things now. You know, the loss of my family, my own coming of age and my own aging, and my own decline towards my own death. The sense of sorrow that I have towards losing relationships that I hoped I would maintain. The grief that I have over losses that I'll take in my own pursuits and my own business. The rejections. You know, these things that I know are going to happen and I know are coming because I'm not a fool. But I'm not going to be sad about, oh, the United States, it could have gone this way and Canada could have gone that way. Okay, cool. Sure. It didn't. It's not going to. My hope, if I want to hang on to any shard of hope at all for what's going to happen, is that there is going to be another organic popular uprising like Occupy or the George Floyd protests. And I got to tell you, if there is one, I think it's going to be a lot crazier. I think it's going to be a lot crazier. Like, the Occupy uprisings were mainly peaceful, right? They were mainly peaceful. Sure, there was some, like, property destruction and all that kind of stuff. You sort of expect that kind of stuff. It was mainly peaceful. The George Floyd protests were more violent. There was more destruction. They were burning down police departments. Now with the Luigi Mangione situation, the whole Luigi thing, where we all looked at one another and said, yeah, it's fine to kill these people. I think the next one's going to be really nuts. And moreover, I think that they're ready for it. Like, the power structure, I think, knows. So. So, I'd say if I have any advice for whatever it's worth, let's get to know your neighbors. Join your local communities. Right? Even if it's a church, group. Get to know the people who are around you. If you have a communist group, get to know them. Right? Talk to them. Participate as best you can. Try to get connected to local mutual aid groups. Grow your own food if you can. And just do your best. Be nice to yourself. Forgive yourself. We're all caught up in it. You're not a god. We're all trying. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.